As is normal in our public meetings, the first 45 minutes or so of our meetings is dedicated to public testimony. And I have 17 people who have signed up wishing to provide public testimony to the board this morning. And this can be on any items related to anything that's on the budget or any other issues or concerns with TriMet. And if we can, we'll try to address those after the public forum, or if we're not the appropriate body to deal with those issues, we'll make sure the staff gets you in contact with the right people to do that. Since we do have 17 people this morning signed up, I do not want to see anybody. I'm seeing more coming our way here, so it's even going to be more than 17. I can tell that. I'm going to ask you all to limit your testimony to 3 minutes this morning, if at all possible. We do have one folk who has indicated needs some additional time due to some disabilities, and we will definitely allow that. But what I'm going to do is call you up 2 at a time and ask you to introduce yourself and again, provide a testimony, and we will move through this so that we have an opportunity to hear everybody. And I will point out for anybody watching this at home, we provide a sign-up sheet ahead of the meeting, and people are called up based on the order in which they sign up for the testimony. So with that, I'm going to call up the first two who would like to testify, and that's Chris Walker, representing the Committee on Accessible Transportation, and Jim Howell with AORTA, which is American Association of Rail and Transit Authorities, if I've got that right. So do I see Jim? There's Jim, okay. You can go ahead, Chris.
Okay, sorry. Good morning, everybody. First thing, I wrote a letter to you guys about some issues as you're talking about the contract with Broadway Cab and TriMet Lift, and just want to put those at the forefront of your mind. There are a lot of people with the lift service who use the cabs to get around, and there sometimes could be a lot of issues, so I just wanted to make sure that those are up front in your minds as you're considering today's resolutions. And also, I just wanted to compliment you guys on the way that the max improvement worked. It seemed to go pretty well, and you have a lot to be thankful for with patient people and commuters that waited so long, dealt with everything so well, and I just think that, just making sure we really communicate how well how thankful everyone is for people to endure that would be a great thing to do.
Chris, thank you for your comments on that. I think the board would agree with you on a job well done. We'll probably have some comments from the general manager about that repair work. But I also do want to acknowledge and thank the riders for their patience and flexibility during the time of those repairs. It was very helpful. Thanks, Chris. Jim.
Hello, my name is Jim Howell. I'm with AORTA, the Association of Oregon Rail and Transit Advocates. I'm here to ask the board to withdraw its support of ODOT's plan to spend over $1 billion on freeway projects in the Portland metropolitan area, and for TriMet to assume the responsibility of reducing congestion on these freeways with viable transit projects. In today's Willamette Week, I urge you all to get a copy. There's an article called Portland's Fantasy Transit Map. It's one that I had developed over the years. And there are viable transit alternatives to these freeway projects. But unfortunately, TriMets in their planning have not addressed that. The east side freeway widening could be replaced with a transit project. There's bus service that could be provided on I-205 and I-5 that was in the plan back in 1990 and has never been built or never been in service. It's not a matter of building anything, it's a matter of providing the service. And there's other proposals, and they're in this. I'll leave this copy with you. And that's about the extent of my comments today.
All right. Thank you for your comments, Jim. I appreciate that. All right, the next two we have signed up are Charles Bridge Crane Johnson with the Bridge Crane Bus United, I guess, Opal Alliance, and Ken Marks from the Rosewood neighborhood.
Good morning, President Warner and board members. My name is Kem Marks, and I'm with the Rosewood Initiative. I will be providing some written testimony, and I appreciate your allowing me a few extra seconds to read this. I am here today to speak about the bus line on 162nd and 158 Avenues, road that have recently been initiated or planning. Rosewood Initiative appreciates TriMet's finding resources to initiate this service. However, our position continues to be that the 100 or so service hours for this route are insufficient. These hours work out to service Monday through Friday with totally inadequate 45-minute headways and no weekend service at all. And this is inadequate to the community's needs for many different reasons. One, the gap in north-south service between Southeast 122nd and 181st is 2.9 miles. The only direct transit connection to the Columbia Corridor for East Portland and West Gresham is the number 87, requiring extremely long out-of-direction trips. The same is true for people who need to do other business. They have to do extremely long out-of-directional trips that could easily be done in half the time or less. East Portland and West Gresham will experience a significant portion of the influx of new residents over the next decade. A large percentage of the current and future residents include communities of concern, including people of color, elders, and immigrants and refugees. East Portland and West Gresham have historically lagged behind other parts of the system. As there are numerous reasons for the need for frequent and weekend service, we also recognize there are barriers, including funding and infrastructure improvements to ensure safe access to transit, which involve multiple jurisdictions. Yesterday, representatives from Rosewood and TriMet met to discuss these issues, and although we did not come away with a quote-unquote formal agreement, we did come to an understanding that TriMet will work with Rosewood community partners and the numerous jurisdictional partners to establish a working group to concentrate on infrastructure and service improvements along the line, much as TriMet and the City of Portland did on 122nd Avenue. Rosewood sees this as a positive step forward. We will be reaching out to the other jurisdictional partners to come to the table. In conclusion, there are potential funding sources that should be considered for both operation and infrastructure improvements. These include a possible employee payroll tax and a bond measure sponsored by TriMet. If these funding sources become reality, a portion should be used to increase service and provide for access to transit for this specific route and other East Portland and West Gresham projects. It goes without saying that Oregon 217, the Rose Corridor, Abernathy Bridge, and the Southwest Corridor are a long way from the outer east side. Wisdom and history suggest it should not be neglected. And a little off of my written testimony, I would add that a little unsolicited advice, if the bond measure that you all are looking at moves forward, a lot of people who are not going to benefit from the items that are projects I listed a few seconds ago are going to have a hard time figuring out why they should support that bond measure if they do not see direct or even semi-direct benefits. I can tell you that the people in the outer areas that do not benefit from these projects will not support this bond measure, and that will leave you all in a significant hole. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good morning, TriMet Board members.
morning.
My name is Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. No relation to Mr. Terrell Johnson, who was executed, killed by TriMet police officers within these last 2 weeks. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks yesterday. I think there's a lot to talk about, but we shall have a brief moment of silence to remember Mr. Terrell Johnson, killed on TriMet property by Portland police, working as TriMet police. Certainly he deserves more time than that, but there's many things we need to talk about. More and more people will be talking to you about the benefits, actually, of having unarmed transit police. They can't kill people with their guns, but also armed police, it seems, are becoming more of an escalator than a de-escalator. Groups will be talking to you about the need for a moratorium on fair enforcement and fair checkpoints. It's really a gross waste of resources when a Max pulls up to a stop and there's 8 armed people blocking every Max store. It's not efficient. It doesn't positively contribute to the revenue stream. It concerns Commissioner Amanda Fritz on the Portland City Council. It was an issue when we were debating whether we should go ahead and fund things back when Chief Modica was in the situation for leading the TriMet police. The budget process has got to be more participatory so we don't end up with insane results like building a mini Gitmo in Old Town Chinatown. People are just calling it the TriMet jail, but it's really more of an interrogation cell. I'm not saying there's going to be waterboarding happening there. I'm just saying that it's only a few blocks from the interrogation cells we already have in our fabulous jail. So I hope that you'll work very closely with the PDC to find a much better way to use these federal funds. I know they can't be used for things we really need, like fare mitigation for very low-income people or even free fares for ultra-low-income people. But I hope you'll very seriously look to engage constructively with the PDC, Dr. Morlin Kapua and other members on that board, so that we can see that, I believe it's federal grant money, used for something much more community beneficial than interrogation cell jails. Another useless thing that's slipped into the TriMet conversation lately is more lanes of freeway. Nope. Don't need more lanes of freeway. I mean, you can make the argument that they're needed, but when people have bad behaviors of excessive car use, single occupancy vehicles, you shouldn't enable that in this. Even if we went to all electric vehicles, it's still insane to kill nature to put down pavement. And I don't know, can I find you on eBay? I hear that Governor Kate Brown has you all up for auction. So I think that somewhere between you and Metro, there needs to be a discussion working group on how, in a country that used to be proud of its democracy, regardless of how imperialist we were, could have a TriMet system that's not privatized under Ports Dubai or somebody, but is led by the elected Metro government. I appreciate your willingness to serve under appointment from the governor, but look, my clock is faster than your little blinky light. So thank you for your service, but please consider the idea that your engagement, that TriMet should transition to either being under Metro or separate elected board. And let's not forget Terrell Johnson, and that the city of Portland was sued by the United States Department of Justice for situations of people with mental health issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, the next two I have coming up are Joe Walsh and James Shirtliff.
No guns, no sleep. No guns, no sleep.
Mr. Joe Wall and James Shirtliff. All right, thank you. Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry, is that you?
Good morning. My name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. I wasn't going to speak here today because, number one, I'm not feeling that well. And number two, I didn't know if I'd be qualified to convince you of anything. You know, I know we have public testimony, and with the city council and the county, it's getting to the point where we look at you and you're looking at your watches for us to shut up, to get it over with, you know? And you have a budget that you're going to spend $11 million on a place for what? To hold people? To arrest them? To interrogate them? That's not your job. Your job is to get me on the 4 bus to get me here. That's your job. So how do I convince you that we are in terrible, dangerous times right now? Every morning I get up, I ask my wife, because she's usually the first one up watching television. I say, how bad is it? And every morning for the last 3 weeks, she said to me, it's bad. It's really bad. From the national level to you. And I know that you guys are doing your civil duty and you're trying to do the best you can. I'm giving you that. As an activist, I'm giving you that. Why would you spend $11 million? And why do you have so many cops with guns? You don't need cops with guns. You know, sometimes I forget my past. And if I remember, I go back up and I get it, or I pay the $1.25, which is really good for me, that $1.25, and not the $2.50. That's important. And it's important for the students, and it's important for the people that are homeless, that they need to travel, so they take the risk of traveling, and you arrest them. And now you want to build a place to keep them. Why? That's not your job. Do your job, please, and get away from this $11 million. And be creative and say, you know what? We got a problem. We got 1,500, if you talk to some people, 5,000 if you talk to other people, of people just surviving one day. One day, tomorrow. That's all they're interested in, tomorrow, to get through today. Take the $11 million and help them, for God's sakes. Would you please do it for the humanity in you? I'm looking at your eyes, and you're human. You're not animals. You're human. You have human spirit. And if you go before God someday and you have to answer for people dying on the streets because you used $11 million to lock them up, he's not going to be happy, or she's not going to be happy.
Thank you, Mr.
You're going to be in a lot of trouble. So please,
Thank you.
in the name of God, stop it!
Thank you very much. Mr. Walsh. Thank you. Wow.
That's a tough one to follow. I'm James Shurtleff, a concerned citizen. I also believe that it's critical that we view ridership through the lens of social justice, not criminal justice. And I urge the board to reject the $11 million for the detention center. Thank you.
Thank you.
No guns, no sleep.
All right. All right. All right, the next two we have are Guy Berliner and Russell Brown.
I'm Guy Berliner. I come to you with a perspective. I used to be a huge TriMet fan and advocate, And I have to say, I'm not bristling with statistics and studies to share with you, but I am feeling a white-hot rage. And I'm one of the folks that you really need to have on your side, so this is bad. I've witnessed a young woman with a child in tow on her way to daycare get yanked off the train, not because she didn't have the fare, but because she hadn't validated her ticket. So now she's going to be late to daycare, late to her job, maybe lose it, maybe lose her housing as a result, all because, God forbid, she didn't pay exactly the right fare because she was neglectful, or maybe she cheated, God forbid. But what are the consequences for her, for her child? This is really outrageous. When I first came to Portland, I used to have folks visit me back before you yanked Fairless Square away from us. And I remember most of my relatives are fairly, well off. They don't necessarily need to take transit. But I'd take them around and show them the cultural district, as we call it in places. And we'd get on the trains, we'd get on the buses, and they'd ask me, well, where do I pay? How much? And I'd tell them, you don't, it's free. We're in Fairless Square. And they'd all marvel, wow, what a charming, what a gracious, what a sophisticated city Portland is. And now all of a sudden, you have loads of people who are middle or upper middle class who are big advocates for transit. You've lost that. You've destroyed one of the greatest goodwill ambassadors for transit that anyone could ever have come up with because of this niggling obsession with making sure that everybody at every single instant, at every single nanosecond, pays the exactly correct amount of money. There's a name for that ideology. It's called neoliberalism. It's called neoliberal capitalism, and it's gotten us to the point where the polar ice caps are melting, and we may only have 10 years left of this bloody civilization before it collapses. This is the wrong approach, folks. There are such things as virtuous circles, and there are such things as vicious circles. We're now in a vicious circle. When you put stinginess and greed and viciousness out into the world, you multiply it. When you put generosity, compassion, and empathy out in the world, you multiply that. Which do we want? Do we want a virtuous circle or a vicious circle? Because we're in a vicious circle now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
My name is Russell Brown. I'm a alum from Cleveland High School. I am here for Terrell Johnson, and I'm not going to talk too much about that because I don't want to cry during public testimony. I will say Terrell and I went to high school together. He played football. We were in the same journalism class. We didn't know each other well, but we always got along. I want to echo much of what has already been said about the circumstances surrounding Terrell Johnson's death. And I also want to ask the board to stop allowing different agencies, different police agencies, to monitor transit stations together. It's ridiculous. Ahir Johnson should be fired. I recognize you don't have complete control over that, but you need to help us hold the police accountable for this. This was completely and utterly ridiculous. 2 police officers from different agencies should not be allowed to work together on the same case. Terrell Johnson was fleeing the scene, okay? Y'all are asking us to, or the police department has been asking us to just look at the facts. I'm looking at the facts, and looking at the facts, I'm calling this murder.
Thank you. So I have Shannon from the Sisters of the Road and Diana Remke from Oregon Physician for Social Responsibility.
No guns, no sweeps. No guns, no sweeps. Moratorium now.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon, and I'm here as a representative of Sisters of the Road. And for those unaware, Sisters is right on the corner of 6th and Davis. We've been there since 1979, and we are a low-cost restaurant where people can work for their meals. A lot of the people that we serve are living outside. A lot of the people we serve are transit-dependent and poor, and of course are disproportionately people of color, trans people, people who are marginalized by other systems. So I'm here with a few different things to say about the valid outrage that people are experiencing. And I also think this is a really awesome turnout for your board meetings. Do you usually get this level of community engagement? That's pretty great. And that's something that you should maybe take that energy and run with it. So we've all got ideas. And some of the things that Sisters is bringing to your attention as places where we think that you could look for solutions moving forward are participatory budgeting. It's quite possible, though I think unlikely, that the promised savings from moving this transit station would have been something a community group would have liked. It's also more likely, in my opinion, that people would have preferred other capital improvements. And you don't know that. And I think that's the problem, is that you don't have that community buy-in into your budget. So where can you get that, and where can you learn what the community would prefer to have done with that money? Secondly, the fear and distrust of transit enforcement of all kinds. People, especially at Sisters, use TriMet because it's shelter for a day. It's somewhere warm, it's somewhere cool. And it's necessary for survival. A low-income fare would be key. That's one thing, obviously, that I think you all can do. And I think the work being done to keep fare enforcement out of the criminal justice system is good. Certainly a move in the right direction, but definitely needs to be better. Musical interlude. Also, contracting with municipalities' law enforcement is what leads to the needless and senseless killing of people who are using transit. The Terrell Johnson killing was because of a militarized police, and that flies in the face of everything that TriMet stands for or purports to stand for in terms of a public transit system and being a public good. So you all have an opportunity to use your leverage as people that are contracting with these municipalities to say, this is not what we want out of the people who are enforcing things on our public transportation system. People do not need to be armed on our public transportation system. You're getting the same problems that were coming out of that DOJ settlement because you're using the same people in the same system. So you need to look at your systems and change them. Training on nonviolent de-escalation, on community resources, on mental diversity are all things that could be put into a new and more equitable safety system on TriMet. So I should stop, but I just think that you can look to places where you can avoid this in the future and take this energy moving forward. What can you learn? What can you implement to avoid senseless deaths, to avoid needless harassment, and let equity drive safety measures moving forward? Thank you.
Shannon. Ms. Remke?
My name is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Dr. Diana Rempe. I'm a community psychologist, and I live in North Portland, and I'm here representing Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, my family, and my community. Oregon PSR, as we call it, to make it shorter, uses the values and expertise of medicine and public health in our work to alleviate the gravest threats to human health and survival. Our work on climate change has led us to envision the path to a low-carbon, healthy climate future where the health, well-being, and happiness of people and communities is prioritized. So mass transit plays an important and major role in our transition to a healthy, safe, and just future where our climate's protected and ease of mobility enhances opportunity for all citizens, especially those who are marginalized in our current system. Personally, I love TriMet. Right, I don't own a car. I use the bus and the MAX all the time, and we have some of the best bus drivers I've ever encountered. But unfortunately, however, my experience as a middle-class white woman is not the experience of so many of the people who use TriMet here in Portland. A recent study at PSU, as we all know, showed that amongst citizens charged with fare evasion, that African American people were more likely to be banned or excluded from TriMet than white people. This trend was more pronounced when the interaction involved local police who were acting on transit duty than when TriMet's fare inspectors were involved. So it is disheartening to see TriMet responding to these findings by proposing an increase in their in-house criminal justice system via spending $11 million to build a new transit police station, which they justify, or you all justify, in part by imagining a 30% increase in police staff in the near future. It's 30%. That's your own numbers. This while ridership is down and while crimes reported by TriMet customers have dropped 40%. So if TriMet is serious about real safety concerns for marginalized people who are disproportionately communities of color and for TriMet drivers, then you should not be building a jail in order to add more armed police officers to your staff. Transit police should never, ever be armed. Instead, TriMet officers should be well-trained. They should be well-trained in de-escalation techniques and work from a community policing model that adds safety monitors rather than police officers. Instead of a new police station, TriMet should take that money, buy more buses, improve transit centers and bus stops. TriMet should focus all its attention on increasing ridership through first implementing a moratorium on fare enforcement and on fare checkpoints. Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility has a long history of working for peace and demilitarization abroad and at home. A militarized transit system targets low-income people and people of color. TriMet should focus on its core mission and provide all citizens affordable, excellent, reliable, and frequent mass transit. I am urging you all to remove the funding for the transit police facility from the budget you'll vote on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next two that I have are Sydney Summerfield and Keith Schultz. And if you're agreeing with the other folks, I'd like to make sure that we have enough time to get to everybody. Maybe you can just say you agree with what's been said earlier.
No guns, no sweeps. No guns, no sweeps. Moratorium now.
Hi, I'm Sydney Summerfield.
Good morning.
I didn't realize that I was going to be speaking publicly. I just wrote down my comments. But I am here to support the other comments around the detention center. And I'll just leave it at that. She was a wonderful speaker, the last speaker, and I think she said everything that I would like to say. So I second that.
Thank you. Keith, I don't see the coat on today, so.
I've got it with me.
Okay.
Didn't put it on. Yeah. Good morning, TriMet.
Good morning.
Board. Keith. I'm Keith Schultz, a transit-dependent member of Bus Riders Unite from Gresham. I'm here today to share my opposition to the relocation of the transit jail facility. And I'm a frequent user of our public transportation system. It is the only way that I can get around to the places I need to be. And I have been using the Honored Citizen Fare since I have been eligible for Medicare. It has been 6 years since I first got my Honored Citizen ID here. But I have only been asked to show it once while riding transit. You may call it luck, but I know it's because of my white privilege. And I have seen firsthand how TriMet checks for fares on transit. I have been skipped multiple times, not even bothered to show my fare, and seen how they would go directly to people of color first. I would see how people would get nervous at the presence of armed officers, including myself. The relocation of this transit police jail will not improve safety on transit. Future expansion of the transit police station will not improve security. What we need are unarmed transit ambassadors, folks who can help people better understand transit and can help people in case of emergencies. We also need a moratorium on fare sweeps, or as you may know them, fare checkpoints. These practices have not increased the safety of our transit system and has been used to intimidate individuals. I hope that this is not the type of customer service that you are trying to achieve. Our community wants full transparency and accountability from this agency. This can be achieved if you engage community in the development of your budgets. Let us help you build a better relationship with your transit riders.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Keith.
Next up, I have David Bouchard and Justin Norton Keston.
No guns, no sweeps. No guns, no sweeps. Moratorium now. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm David Bouchard, and I'm the chair of the Research and Advisory Committee for Bus Riders Unite. I'm here before you to express concerns that I have regarding this agency's budget. It is quite clear to us that this agency would rather spend money beefing up the police presence on the transit system without coming to the communities who will be victimized by this unnecessary police expansion. On May 11th, an officer killed Tyrell Johnson at your Flavel Street Green Line station. This police officer was assigned to your Transit Police Division. The violence and killing by police must stop. Our community does not feel safe with the presence of armed transit police officers. We want to reduce the presence of guns on our system. For the long term, we should look at moving away from police officers patrolling transit. We could replace them with safety monitors or transit ambassadors, people who provide information to better use transit while providing emergency assistance when needed. I mean, this could be a program that could be nationally renowned if it was developed correctly. It could really be something. Armed cops do not make our buses and trains safer. We also demand a moratorium on fare sweeps until TriMet can conduct them in a fair manner without targeting immigrant communities and people of color. TriMet officers have been known to harass riders using intimidation to assert their authority. And recently, some have been questioning riders' immigration status. TriMet needs to improve its transparency and accountability to our community. The current budgeting process is the exact opposite of that. The budget has been developed behind closed doors without any community input, but a participatory budgeting process would help TriMet engage transit riders and rebuild trust with the community. New York City has seen an increase in participation year after year and has developed the type of relationship we want to have with you. One of mutual understanding and trust that TriMet will do the right thing.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Justin Norton Kurtzen. I'm here representing Portland Jobs with Justice, which is a coalition of over 100 labor, faith, community, and student organizations that work together in support of workers' rights and racial and gender justice. And I'm here to express our deep concern and our opposition to the proposed use of this $11 million. The militarization of the TriMet, it threatens communities of color. It's an investment in continuing an already troubling disproportionate enforcement on TriMet, and it drains resources that should be used in our community to improve public transportation. Through things like more frequent service, lower and free fares for low-income people, and through improved bus stops. Both riders and drivers and the community in general oppose the continued militarization. They're calling for a demilitarization of TriMet. The recent killing of Tyrell Johnson by transit police, this murder was an unnecessary tragedy. It could have and it should have been avoided, which is exactly why We shouldn't be putting more armed cops on our buses. It's exactly why this money should be being spent for unarmed safety monitors who are trained to de-escalate rather than escalate tense situations. Like other people have expressed, we need a moratorium on fare enforcement and fare checkpoints. These sweeps and checkpoints, they don't improve the safety of our buses. They only cause stress and anxiety for riders, many of whom, as was just said, have shared that enforcement officers are asking them about their citizenship status. In a city, in a county, in a state with sanctuary status. This is unacceptable and it's shameful. Finally, we need a participatory budget process. The current process doesn't allow community members any influence in the creation of our public transportation system. We come here, like Joe said, we come here and we talk and you stare at us and it really doesn't seem like you care. And I really hope that you will prove me wrong, that you will prove us wrong on that today. Because you should care. You should care about what the riders and the workers, the people who use and who make the transit system run, you should care about what they think about this. I really hope that you do.
Thank you. All right, next I'm going to call Nick Phillips and Carrie Waters. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Hi.
Nicole.
I'm Nick Phillips. I'm on Leadership Committee with Bus Riders Unite and a member of the Transit Equity Advisory Committee. Hi. So I was having difficulty pulling together my comments this morning. And it suddenly hit me why. And that's because we're back where we started. With the transfer extension, the service changes and the fare increases, e-fare, the end of Fairless Square, these were all decisions that were made without anyone talking to the people that it most affects. And what happened every single time is what you see now. People have a habit of getting very vocal when they feel like that someone's not listening to them or cares about what happens to them. When these decisions are made, we're not questioning whether or not you are making a good business decision. I understand that you're going to do that. You're an organization and you're trying to run a business. The problem is that for those of us who board several times a day, that's me, decisions are made that usually will affect how they use the system. You're adding a police precinct, and I understand the financial. I understand what you're doing with that. I also understand that even though it's been years since my first encounter with fare enforcement, every time I go through Rose Quarter, I'm looking for officers. My heart rate goes up. I'm not over that experience yet. And this is happening every single day to people. When we ask you for things like participatory budgeting, and when we ask that your public engagement be intentional, even when we're asking about a moratorium on the sweeps, it's not because we're questioning whether or not you know how to run a business. It's because we depend on this service, and we have to feel comfortable using it. I tend to avoid the Rose Quarter. So as you're listening to people today, I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said. You're hearing it. Instead of just hearing and reacting to what's being said, listen. Listen to the words that they're using. Pay attention to the people that you see before you. Try to understand why they're saying these things. I would like to believe, and I approach you each time with the hope that you do understand, or that you can understand where we're coming from. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Nick.
Nicole.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Waters. I'm a member of the Tlingit tribe, and I'm here today on behalf of the Native American Youth and Family Center and the Transportation Justice Alliance. At the Transportation Justice Alliance, we seek an affordable, equitable, and environmentally sustainable transportation system. We operate under the principles of affordability, accessibility, and safety, healthy communities, healthy environment, meaningful participation, economic justice, and accountability. The proposed jail is in stark opposition to each and every one of these values. It is frankly a slap in the face to our entire community. Now, we prioritize safety. We want a safe system. We could benefit from, I think someone mentioned transit ambassadors. We need fair educators. We do not need more fair enforcers, and we definitely do not need this jail. I support much of what I heard already, so I will keep this brief. But as a person of color that can pass, I have passing white privilege. I have seen the racial profiling that happens when I'm on transit. I hear stories on a regular basis throughout the Native community, as well as other communities of color as we build cross-cultural climate justice. And in order to move towards this livable region that we all boast about throughout the nation and even internationally, we need to walk our talk here in the city of Portland, in the Portland metropolitan area, and to focus on the things that really matter for our community so that we can afford to get to the places we need to go. And I believe that our community really wants to work with you. We really want to support you in these processes. We want TriMet to succeed. So I encourage you strongly to consider participatory budgeting as a method of moving forward priorities that matter to our entire community and that will meet TriMet's needs as well. So I hope that you will hear everything that we've been sharing with you today. I know that you have to make a decision today on the budget, and I hope that you'll do the right thing. No transit jail.
Huey Ong and Cameron Whitler. I don't know whether, was it? Witten, excuse me, thank you. Oh, yes, Cameron.
No guns, no speech, moratorium now.
Hello, my name is Huey Ong, Executive Director of Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. Well, I would love to actually take credit for organizing this amazing turnout of people here today. This actually wasn't Opal's work. This crowd is here because of TriMet's management. Directors, you are facing a test of your leadership today. Will you hold your employees accountable? Here before you are the people in the community you are appointed to serve. There are people who ride the system because they have to. Some things that is not true of your managers. You're hearing people who are justified in their anger and fear they feel. These people are angry and targeted because of your employees' actions. If TriMet did not contract armed police officers, at least one young man would still be alive. Decision makers within the agencies have installed an electronic fare system nobody asked for and a transit police detention and interrogation facility, a jail, we don't need. They place armed and poorly trained police on our trains. They have escalated and the presence of militarized law enforcement who have inappropriately and without jurisdiction asked riders about citizen status. These unaccountable management decisions are making the system less safe for the people who depend on them. Meanwhile, the buses are running slower than they have in 16 years. It's no wonder ridership is on the decline. We want a system that is more affordable, accessible, and frequent. We don't want to ride and risk death, detainment, or deportation. This community demands democratic participation, justice, and accountability. The community is telling you that armed police officers do not make us feel safe. Armed police officers do not make us feel safe. That interrogation and detention are not appropriate use of transit system dollars you could use for new buses, bus shelters, and maintenance to actually make TriMet safer. The fare sweeps intimidates vulnerable people and need to stop. You have the public participation. You must have public participation in budgeting and policymaking to avoid repeating these mistakes. The community you serve is telling you to show leadership today. Pause on rubber stamping Neil McFarland's budget, address the serious issues we are presenting to you, and create a new path forward. Are you listening?
Thank you.
And it's Hui.
Good morning, board, Manager McFarland. My name is Cameron Witten, and I'm one of the founding members of TriMet Transit Equity Advisory Committee, served on that for 2 years from 2013 to 2015. I have fond memories working with TriMet staff and board members, including John Albell, Jake War, Consuelo Zaragoza, and many others. At that time, most of our work was around transit affordability and transit access. One of the things that has since come up much has been the issue of transit discrimination and profiling. Earlier this year, Multnomah County and other district attorneys agreed that they were no longer going to prosecute fare evaders for interfering with public transit. And at that time, there were reports that almost 3/4 of people who were charged with that were charged because they were fare evaders. While that was a glaring example of transit discrimination, it's not been the only one. Months after, just last month, Terrell Johnson was killed by a transit officer, which put a bright light on the issue of transit profiling here in TriMet. And while I believe that TriMet can be a model of excellence to transit agencies across this country, it's hard to be a model of excellence when you have blood on your hands. Spending $11 million on policing sends the wrong messages to our transit-dependent community. I'm sure all of us in this room would like to see similar investment towards the elimination of discrimination by public transit. Last month, TriMet published a public blog saying that it was asking the legislature to handle fare evasion outside of the court system in order to bring justice to the transit system. But asking for justice is not enough. TriMet has the bargaining power with its 68 transit officers to de-arm safety professionals, prioritize de-escalation, bring transparency to transit discrimination, and bring accountability to the role that TriMet has had in excluding and insulting our low-income communities and communities of color. And I have my own personal story when it comes to transit discrimination. It was 2 years ago, last May, and while most of our transit vehicles are beautiful, I was one that was super janky, and I made a comment to the operator asking if this was safe because there was water everywhere flying in my eyes, making people unsafe. There was a burning chemical smell in this vehicle, and instead of the operator responding to me and telling me it was okay, this would be handled, called the police and said that I was a threat to everybody's safety in that vehicle. And as a person who is black, formerly homeless, low income, I know I come with privileges. Before an officer was able to come to the scene, I was already on the phone with the transportation director, Leah Treat. And even though I was on the phone with her, it did not save me from being charged with a misdemeanor and thrown off that transit and had to go through the court process. That being said, I know many other people in my situation which they would have been charged with an IPT, Class A misdemeanor, or they might have lost their lives. So the argument by TriMet is that this $11 million will improve community safety. My question is, how many millions of dollars are you willing to invest to make sure that we can prevent another death from ever happening on TriMet? Thank you.
All right, Don McFarling and Phil Richmond. I don't see Don McFarling or Phil Richmond. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dan McFarling, and I would like to
strongly endorse the comments I've heard today. I plan to talk about about nuts and bolts rather than the human aspect, but I hope you are listening to the testimony you have heard, and I strongly endorse it. I've included a card there that may not seem relevant, but it is extremely relevant to security and safety. Guns don't make security and safety. I'm a lifelong student and advocate for good, effective public transportation and good transportation policy. I've been a member of AORTA for 40 years and a director for most of those years. Transit ridership in Seattle is growing. Ridership in Portland is declining. Unlike Portland, Seattle has a long-term vision. Seattle has long-term goals. Seattle is building a light rail system designed to carry large numbers of people rapidly from one side of the town to the other. Unlike Portland, Seattle provides frequent bus service carefully integrated with light rail. TriMet is driving down the wrong road. In Portland, on our Milwaukee light rail line, TriMet gave no real thought to connecting with buses until after light rail construction was complete. That is extremely poor planning. Because TriMet has failed to plan, light rail to Milwaukee fails to connect with most bus lines in Milwaukee. Unsurprisingly, ridership is not meeting projections. TriMet's job is to provide alternative, interconnected, frequent bus and rail service. TriMet's job is to provide an alternative to our congested roadways. It is not TriMet's job to advocate for more traffic lanes that will induce more single-occupant vehicles, more congestion, more sprawl, and more carbon emissions. It is not TriMet's job to build jails. We need leadership at TriMet that has knowledge and vision and the desire to provide effective public transportation. And I hope you will look at the Willamette Week article. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And the last two I have signed up are Jared Franz and Edith Gillis.
Okay. Good morning, TriMet Board. My name is Jared Franz. I'm the Public Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for ATU 757, the union that represents TriMet employees. And I mean the essential employees of TriMet, not the private security that's in this room or the transit cops that are out harassing riders. I'm here today to express the union's support for a moratorium on fare sweeps, for the demilitarization and decriminalization of our public transit system, and to call for a participatory budgeting process. Look, cops don't make riders and drivers safer. Drivers especially know this. They often spend 45 minutes or longer waiting for the response to a call that they get. And most of the safety and security that happens on the bus happens because of social pressures or other interventions that happen on the bus from other riders or well-informed, well-trained drivers. More cops, more guns do not make people safer. It's security theater and a favorite tool of white supremacy. The union supports decriminalized, non-militarized solutions to fare inspection, like fare inspectors, that the professional union busters at TriMet have systematically gotten rid of over the years and replaced with armed cops. We also support rider advocates, a program that used to exist, a robust program that used to exist here at TriMet, that put community members from impacted communities on buses to interface with drivers and riders and provide information and de-escalation. It was a popular program that was defunded by TriMet to make more money available for armed cops. We also support a participatory budget process, and I'm going to be really quick on why this is necessary. It is never true when TriMet says they can't afford to do what riders and drivers ask for. What they mean is that they have other priorities for the hundreds of millions of dollars that the agency has. So let's be honest. Let's stop misleading the public and saying we can't afford X or we can't afford Y, and start saying we have different priorities than you. Community priorities, worker priorities are not reflected in the TriMet budget. The TriMet jail is only the latest example of this, but you don't have to look very far to find shenanigans in the TriMet budget. $95 million, in fact. You can look this up. It's line 4 on your capital projects, page 1 in your budget. $95 million this year of operating funds, you know, the funds that you always say you never have enough of, are getting transferred to capital projects this year for construction projects, right? And at the same time, we are being asked to support a statewide regressive wage tax on workers so that TriMet can have more money, presumably to transfer it into their capital construction projects and build a bigger, better jail in a few years. Community priorities need to be represented in this budget. Worker priorities need to be represented in this budget. We demand a stop to fair enforcement sweeps, to militarized and armed cops, and the immediate beginning of a participatory budget process. Thanks.
Jared.
I believe that if something is principled, it is good no matter who does it to whom, and it's bad no matter who does it to whom. If it can be a law that's enforced, then it should be an enforceable law. So, if it is an arrestable offense or an excuse to jail someone, which has the probable results of unemployment, houselessness, loss of children, children losing their schools and education, worsening health or death, to be riding on publicly owned roads and rails with publicly funded vehicles, with publicly funded employees, because someone does not have in-time validated fare, then I want you to immediately post and publish your policy for removing all of the board, administration, and employees who have made it so that the vehicles and the routes are not well planned, not well maintained to be on time, within the allotted time, that you don't have fare machines that validate it reliably, that you don't have the pay equipment on the bus working reliably, that you don't have enough vehicles in the right routes, in the right locations, and you don't have the right policy to be inclusive of people of low income, of short-term disabilities, of crises, and that you don't have a good policy for de-escalating the tensions that having terrorists on board with guns threatening certain people, certain classes against the Constitution. You're poor, you're people of color, you have a political agenda that people don't like, or a religious minority. That escalates tension by all. So those of us who are hard-working, tax-paying, small business owners and volunteers in the community say, this is a waste of my money. I'm no longer going to vote for or fund TriMet because you're not providing the services. You've been lying to us. You've been unfair. And you are creating a society of distrust and alienation, of despair and terrorism, so that our young children do not want to ride public transit. They're not wanting to vote for it. They're not wanting to engage in civic responsibility. They're giving up hope, so they're going to go to the streets, go to direct action, go to violence, because you're not allowing better alternatives. So if this is an arrestable offense, then you can all be arrested because you're guilty in causing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to close the public forum. You know, we are going to be taking action on the budget and other items today, and I don't know whether you're going to be remaining around to hear those actions. I thought it important because I want to make clear, especially for you folks who are here, and I thank you all for coming. And we did listen, and we do hear you and understand your positions and that you feel about this very passionately. I think this board's positions and actions have been really entirely consistent over the last few years with what you folks are looking for. And I just want to remind you, when I talk about things, just a moment, we gave you the opportunity to listen to you. Let me just tell you what I believe we've done in the last 4 or 5 years related to fair enforcement, fines and violations, the low-income fares, and increasing transit service, because they are all entirely consistent with what you've been saying. On the issue of disparate fare enforcement and exclusions, I want to make it clear, if you're not aware, this board actually directed staff to work with Portland State to come up with a study to examine if there were disparate actions being taken in fare enforcement. And while the study said overall there wasn't disparate impacts, you're right, it did definitely show that African Americans were excluded from the system on a more regular basis in more numbers than the majority or other minorities. And we took that very seriously, and we actually worked with the district attorneys and with staff that we said, you know, it is not right that we have people who get a criminal record as a result of a $2.50 fare issue. And we worked very closely with the district attorneys to, again, decide we should no longer move forward in prosecuting those, and frankly not clogging the courts. What's it called? TriMet Tuesday, is that what it used to be? When people would come to the courts. And we said there's got to be a better way of doing that. And we asked staff to come up with some ideas. And I think many of you are aware that we actually are proposing legislation to decriminalize fare enforcement and trying to work on a way to deal with it administratively so that it does not become a blemish on somebody's record for criminal purposes. And we actually can work with folks in other ways to deal with the fare evasion that they've taken. And I think some of you are down there in Salem now, and I want to say I appreciate your help in dealing with that. I think the bill has been heard by one house and is going to be heard by another house, probably the Senate later this week, and maybe we can declare victory on that one. On the issue of low-income fares, I can't say enough that, you know, this board, especially the person sitting to my left and your right from me, has really talked a lot about access to public transportation being a true road to prosperity and something that's really needed. And we believe that, and we put together with Metro a task force on low-income fares and what we ought to be doing for low-income fares. I think we met for about 3 months, I believe, and came up with some recommendations for a program that would work. And Jared, you're right, it's all about priorities and issues, whether we want to have tracks in good condition, keep the trains running, or we want to do some other things. We said we really can't afford that without some new increase in resources. And I think together we've been working with the legislature to enact some new resources at the state level that I think have a good chance of being passed this session that will allow us to fund the low-income fare program for this region. And I think that will be a great attribute for many, many people who can't afford, frankly, to pay for public transportation. You know, and I guess the other thing I need to say here is safety is probably the #1 concern of this board with our transit system. I came on board. I came on board 5 years ago when there was a lot of discussion about TriMet system being unsafe. This board did increase transit police and did increase enforcement. And the numbers show that we have been successful in terms of the system being safer, in terms of aggravated assaults, thefts, and other things. So whether you like it or not, I'm just letting you know that the system. So I will not argue with you that the killing of somebody is unconscionable and so sad. So I don't know him, so I'm sorry. So the bottom line is, what I'm telling you is we are, all right.
You don't know, you're a hypocrite.
It's all right. So all I wanted to say on that is we do believe in safety for our drivers, for our riders, and for the public, and we are going to do what we need to do to ensure that safety. That doesn't mean we cannot be smarter in terms of the way we do it. And I think a number of the suggestions you made today are things that we ought to pursue further. In terms of participatory budgeting, we did do a lot of participation on our budget. And this obviously today shows that people are aware of the budget and are here. But that does not mean that we can't do that better either. So I think your suggestions about how we can do it better will be taken seriously, and I think maybe that's something we can talk about, Mr. General Manager, in the upcoming budget processes. So I just wanted to make it clear, again, I believe overall our objectives are the same. And I hope that you will continue to work with us to improve the system out there, because our desire is to have a system that is accessible to all and is safe for all and affordable for all. So again, I probably said more than I need to. Any of the other board members wish to say anything this morning, or should I just move on to the regular agenda? Okay, I'm going to move on to the regular agenda then. With that, I'm going to call the business meeting for Wednesday, May 24th to order. And we'll start with our board reports, which is, the first is Director Baumann. Can you please give us a report on a committee on accessible transportation?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. The CAT met on May 17th, and this is a short report on the highlights of the business meeting. Lieutenant Rachel Andrew provided an update on the transit police activity and responded to CAT member questions. Claudia Robertson, the CAT Vice Chair and Nominating Committee Facilitator, presented recommendations for appointment for CAT membership for terms beginning July 1st of this year. And the CAT passed a motion to approve the nominating committee's recommendations as presented. And the CAT's recommendations will be forwarded to the general manager for consideration for appointment. Next, there was a presentation about capital projects by Michael Kaiser. There's an update about the Division Transit Project, and also information on the swing gate installation on the Orange Line, and there were responses to CAT member questions about that improvement. Next, there was a report on the status of the Morrison and Yamhill project by Clay Thompson, who's the coordinator of outreach services. And finally, there was a lift operations report from Eileen Collins, the manager of lift service delivery. And Steve Hext of Broadway Cab also attended the meeting and addressed the committee's questions about lift rides provided by Broadway Cab. Thank you. That's the report.
All right. Any questions for Director Baumann? No. I guess I just point out there's some great minutes in the packet. It sounds like you had a marathon meeting at your last meeting, so thank you.
Active group, for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. All right, with that, we'll move on to the Transit Equity Advisory Committee. Dr. Bethel.
Thank you, Mr. President and board members. TIAC met, discussion on the House Bill 2777 with the administrative option, which you've heard a little bit about this morning, and questions about what was going to be the policies, what would be the fines, and et cetera, if it does become an administrative option. Secondly, there was concern expressed around the HOP Fare Pass program, that we wanted to make sure that there is customer awareness, personnel, and training is done in a good way so that people do have the understanding. We've heard a lot this morning, and there was also raised in TIAC about the deployment of transit police, the trauma of people passing through the Rose Quarter Transit or other places where they've encountered transit police. That transit police is on a fishing expedition looking for people with warrants or exclusions, running ID checks, such as they've mentioned about immigration and things like that. I've also heard raised this morning again about participatory budget process from members of the community. That is about it without repeating in the others, but I would like to offer, and again for TIAC as we talk about transit equity, and I know many of our testifiers this morning has left. The one way to get education and information is to stay and hear the board's discussions, interact at those times, and I think we will then begin to work towards a better understanding. Whenever one works on their own understanding without including the understanding of others, we always get left with one opinion, and that's mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bethel. Any questions for Dr. Bethel about the TIAC report? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to the Finance and Audit Committee report. Director Prosser.
Yes, the Finance and Audit Committee met this morning. On our agenda, we had a presentation of budget updates. From the time that this board approved the budget to go to the Multnomah County Tax Supervising Commission, which is a public agency appointed by the governor to review and approve budgets, and today, the day we will adopt the budget, there have been a number of changes to the budget. Most of these are technical in nature. There's a chart that actually is in our board packet that details what they are. Primarily, these reflect carryover of capital projects that were planned for the fiscal year we are in and did not get completed, and so will be completed next fiscal year, so we need to get the money over there. And some, same thing with some bond proceeds. So we got a presentation on that, and that's reflected in the budget that we will be considering today. We also got a presentation on regional funding initiatives and the state transportation package that is moving through the legislature, and what is the current status of that transportation package, which, as President Warner indicated, does include money for a low-income fare program at TriMet. So that was the matters that we discussed today. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Prosser? Seeing then in the last report, I don't know whether there was a Metro Policy Advisory Committee, but could you comment on that, Prosser?
The last Metro Policy Advisory Committee that I attended was April 26th. I believe there was one earlier this month, but I was out of town and tried to arrange for an alternate to go in my place. On the April 26th meeting, we got an update on the regional transportation plan, which is in the process of being redone this year. It's something that happens every 4 or 5 years. So we saw where they are, and they're about halfway through the process, they being Metro. We got a draft of their vision statement and goals and objectives that they have developed to guide the development of that plan. Most of the discussion around that matter focused on the vision statement, which, as presented, is pretty lengthy. It's the kind of vision statement that really comes out of committees, where everybody puts something in and kind of lose the overall picture. So there was discussion there that we've indicated that vision statement needs to be tightened up and and more to the point to help the public understand what this regional transportation plan is all about. So that is my report. I have not had a chance to get together with the alternate who went in my place. There is not a meeting tonight, so when I report next, I could report on what I find out about what happened earlier this month.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Director Prosser? Seeing none then, Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, good morning. Per the first piece of testimony you got from Chris Walker this morning, I wanted to just acknowledge the agency's completion of the Morrison Yamhill reconstruction of the switches as a very major piece of work that was accomplished on time and on budget, and most of all to thank our riders for their patience. I think it's been certainly a long 3 weeks for us with a lot of work, a lot of extra staff on the street helping our customers transfer to the shuttle buses and sort of providing customer service. But it went, I think, exceptionally well. And again, my great thanks not only to our customers, but to our staff that really went the extra mile to actually get that work done. Just share one statistic with you. We received 72 calls at our call center about this topic, and 33% of those commenters were compliments to TriMet for the work that went on. So I think that just sort of begins to indicate. We did have some bus overloads earlier that we had to respond to. We had lots of little fine-tuning adjustments that particularly took place during that first few days of the shutdown. But again, overall, I think a very successful effort and really the heart of our system. So again, thanks to the TriMet staff. We were looking forward to a week of great service, but again, yesterday we were affected by a fire in a utility vault, and so much of downtown was affected by that. We were able to continue service through downtown, but again, it was slowed because of the signal system and the impacts on the signal system overall. We're happy to be back to normal as of last night and through this morning. Turning to ridership, we carried 8.2 million rides on the TriMet system last month, and the month did show about the same trends you're quite familiar with, which is that we have seen either flat or actually increasing ridership during the peak hours and reduced ridership during midday and weekends. And so overall, the month was down about 4%. Just to note that the peak hours were up. We actually saw pretty healthy increases in MAX and particularly for the Orange Line. So with that, what I wanted to do was transition to the quarterly performance indicators that call up Doug Kelsey, and we can certainly probably elaborate on the ridership issues associated with that. So.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board.
Morning.
Again, the report typically is divided into sort of three key sections. The first section of my report this morning will speak specifically about the vehicle and the overall system reliability. Specifically to the bus and rail maintenance of way, all exceeded their preventive maintenance objectives for the first quarter. And again, that's just a reminder that's established by the Federal Transportation Agency of 80%. The bus maintenance was 80.1%, so it did fall below the prior quarter and prior year's results. However, the rail equipment maintenance was 90.8%. And I'm going to put both of these in an important category. You'll see this is a bit of a theme to this quarterly report. So if we can go back in time, and unlike what you see out the window in terms of great weather, we can go back and remind you of all the consistent storms we had, the ice storms, the winter storms, where it was literally one after another for literally weeks on end. So you'll see that reflected in some of the results and the challenges, in fact, that our overall team had to deliver service every day. So you'll see that reflected in despite that, though, in the rail side, it was actually up. So that was a real credit to the maintenance team for pulling that off despite the challenging weather we had. I think something that is important here, despite the challenging weather, all critical safety preventative maintenance were met. So some of those other discretionary items where you have latitude and such, the team made a really nice choice of triaging what needs to go out the door to meet service each and every day. So just to give the board confidence and the public confidence, all our safety PMs, if you will, or preventative maintenance, were achieved, which is excellent. As a reminder, one of the public comments this morning was about the reliability of our ticket vending machines. Well, pleased once again to report to you it's 100% reliable for the last quarter, which is a tremendous achievement as well. So, so the equipment is performing very well. In terms of bus mean distance between failure, we're seeing a significant decrease here, 15.7% over this quarter. Again, this is very much attributed, this is one of the categories to the weather we faced. So as the buses came in, broken chains, all those kind of things that come with really, really challenging weather. So I think we're already seeing the uptick now as we look forward to the more appropriate weather that the agency's facing now. Another contributor to it was also the fact that we're actually running to meet service requirements. We also put out a bunch of buses that were at the back end of their life that were, almost at the disposal side. We brought those back into service to help us meet the full requirements of running the most optimal fleet we possibly could. So that would be part of the mean distance between failure calculation, sort of below the numbers, if you will. In terms of MAX, mean distance between failures, it really had a strong quarter performance. It actually increased by just under 22% in its performance over the previous year, and just over 9% over the previous quarter. This area has shown some definite improvement. However, we do know there's a significant long journey to go to really keep building on the long-term mean distance between failure of their overall fleet and infrastructure, particularly on the fleet side. An example of areas where we're looking to try and, if you will, rewire some of our processes, we're looking at applying things like Lean and Six Sigma. So we're actually piloting some of those examples of looking at processes and how do you carve out productivity in real measurable terms, including returns on investment for productivity, net present values, things of that nature, where it's not just about productivity, it's about how you translate that into real meaningful outcomes and new wired effectiveness for the organization. So we're hopeful through that pilot that we'll be able to expand this further throughout the agency as a way of doing business, if you will. Maintenance attendance overall, it was basically flat over the last quarter of 93%. In terms of service delivery, overall MAX and bus service increased from the previous quarter. The bus did decrease by 0.6 over the previous year. The West commuter rail system rebounded back from the previous quarter back to 96%. So I think it's back in that top tier performer if you're looking at that 95 plus band, if you will. So, but West is back to where I think we all know it to be on a regular basis. Bus on-time performance, they've developed a pretty comprehensive improvement plan to build already on a pretty reasonable bus on-time performance score, if you will, in the lower 80s. Again, we've set our target that 84+% range, and in fact, over the last 30 days, we're tracking about 85%, if you will. So we're steady progress. It will take quite a while as we work. Unlike rail, where we actually control the direct infrastructure, not just what runs on top of it, we have to work with our really critical partners as well on top of the things that we know we need to do as well to help serve our customers better. I did have a look at the numbers in terms of if you take out the on-time performance for the bus with a significant, the bus on-time performance would actually be tracking about 84%, or a 2% net increase of where we were without the weather involved. So weather clearly did have an impact on us. In terms of MAX on-time performance, it has increased from in Q1 of 16, quarter one, from 81.6%. It's now tracking this last quarter to 83%. In fact, the last 30 days rolling as of this morning, we are literally at 91.0% on-time performance for the last 30 days rolling, including the MAX, the Morrison-Yamhill disruption. So as Neil referred to earlier, a real thank you to the team for dealing not only with the complexities of significant disruption in the downtown core, but also the challenges of service on top of that sometimes we have disruptions in service that go with the disruption itself in construction. So a pretty complex orchestra to pull off every day if you kind of zoom out to the broader network level. So a real thanks to the team for this. West on-time performance, again, from 92.9% to 96%, or a 3.7% increase. Employee attendance has shown a decline about 1.4%. I think one of the things was we dug into the numbers. This is the long weather patterns, not that any individual day had an effect, but there was a real durability side to this weather pattern over this last winter that I think all employees who were involved in the operating and delivery of daily service, I frankly are still feeling some of that residual challenge and pain. So it really took a lot out of people. Boarding rides per hour increased last quarter by 2.2%. And the overall bus boardings are up 3.8%, but down 4.5% over the last year at this time. And bus boardings around the nation, in fact, we were just at a recent conference in Montreal. In fact, it was one of the topics was the broader challenge of ridership, particularly on the bus network throughout North America, with the exception of, I think it's about 7 properties. So this is an area we need to continue to really focus and dig in on how do we manage and turn that around to a positive outcome. West boardings per ride per revenue hour, they're flat and up 2.2%. The third section of my report in terms of operator support, the annual training we provide, we are actually well ahead of schedule for this year, more so than other years for both bus and rail. We expect this to be complete probably by the end of next quarter, so for the full year. So we're really pushing this ahead. And just a couple statistics, particularly on the rail side, we'll talk a little bit about the safety rail violations a little bit later. But as an example, last year at this time, we had 4 trainers on rail. We are now up to 9, and over the next 3 weeks, we'll have another 3. So we will be up to 12 dedicated rail trainers. In comparing year over year, the actual number of observation-based training to get out there and help our operators, support them, we know we have to, particularly those first few months and first few years are really critical, and we need to do more of that. There are observation-based training year over year for the last 90 days is up over 60%. So we're really trying to put some efforts at this. Do we need more? I would say yes, we do. But if you start looking at the long term, like virtual reality simulators, things of that nature will really also contribute to the human side. So we really need to leverage all of that to really help support our operators be successful. And we are seeing the results of the operators by spending time in the seats, if you will, and their actual results improving. We still have work to do, though, but there is good progress coming. The fixed route bus service delivery increase of 3.4% over the previous quarter. This one, we're monitoring this one. When you look at, compare it to accommodations, as you'll see later in the report, the accommodations you can see are very much up. And it's a real tribute to the operators we have out there, particularly during the adverse conditions. Some of the heroics that these individuals performed on all of our behalf are exemplary and frankly second to none. There are some amazing stories that are coming out right now. That would conclude my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions from the board? Gina, thank you very much.
So I think we'd like to continue with Doug on the update on the rail safety audit. So Doug, if you could jump into that, please.
Sure, happy to. Thank you. There we go. I can grab the steering wheel here just for a sec. So just a quick update for you as on the safety audit, rail compliance audit, where we are to date. So overall, we're up about 10% on the net performance of where what we've outlined was our plan going in. There are some adjustments we're making. There's a couple in the 0 to 6 month period. You'll see in 7 to 12, we're down slightly. In a couple cases, it's timing. There's a couple elements in the report that we think we're going to need more time because they have labor implications and probably overly aggressive on what we think they might be. So one was around looking at benchmarking around discipline and such around for rail operators as an example. So that's going to take some time. We'll have to work through a normal process to put the appropriate implementation in place. However, folks haven't been idle at all. If you look at some of on the chart you have in front of you, you look at the 1 to 2 years and 2+ years, people have been very aggressively working on some of those results as well. So we're trying to hit this on a number of fronts. And so you can see overall the net scorecard is we really are making progress. And to support that, actually the next chart you have in front of you is actually, so how are we doing on the total cumulative rail violations? So like in most living, breathing organizations like ourselves, we have many, many employees and contractors in capital and in electronic systems. You can see the trend overall is down. So from when we started this, from around over 320 incidents per million miles, we're down to about 173. So it will go up and down over time, but the goal is, this is probably never going to end. We have to stay focused on this. It has to absolutely become cultural and deep, but the overall trend is very favorable. Behind the scenes, I would refer to the signal rule violations. So these are really critical ones. So we started back in October, around 144, and if you can kind of see the general trending downwards, progress is being made. Overall, to April of the last reporting period is at just under 80. So again, lots of work to do, but this is one of the important ones, along with the next slide, which is about speed. So speed signals are really crucial. General trend is down. This one has more variability. We do also know that we also have some signals sometimes that trip the technology. So the engineering team is doing a great job trying to help us calibrate the sensitivity of some of those, so we get false trips sometimes. So we're factoring those out, and I think we're seeing some progress here again from 56 when we started down to about 29. So the arrow's moving in the right way. There'll be some variability up and down, but I think we want to take the long-term view of this. And it does not mean in any of these charts that we're unsafe, as the auditor referred to us. It's just we want to make sure we're compliant as well, that goes with being safe. That would conclude my report, unless there's any comments.
Nice progress. Comments or questions?
I have a question. So tell us what you think contributes to the reduced number of rule violations.
I think it's a combination of things. I think we're focusing on training. We are focusing on moving our standard up in terms of intervening sooner. Some of our operators are getting more time in the seat, if you will, and it does take time to work through some of these things. I think we're spending a lot more time as an organization focusing on quick follow-up. And also, if someone we do not believe can make the test because we've upped that standard, we will send them back to be in a bus after the probationary period. So we are running this a lot tighter than I think historically we have. And we're dealing with the sensitivity issues on the technology piece, as I referred to earlier, particularly on the orange line. I think we're seeing that where we've seen a lot of trips that were going on there, and that's not uncommon as a new line. So as we get the bugs out, if you will, make those adjustments, I think that's contributing to this as well.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Not, we'll continue. And I'd like to ask Harry to come up with the report on operator assaults that you've asked for on a monthly basis. But I also, as Harry comes up, I just want to particularly thank Doug for the great work, both on the rule violations and on the on-time performance. But to see Max up above 90% on time over the last 30 days is really quite rewarding for, I know for him, but certainly for everyone else. And I know the customers see that as well. So greatly appreciate that. Harry?
Good morning. My report will be brief this morning. We actually have two major efforts underway currently. As you know, we've installed barriers and we are receiving feedback from the operators. This week, we have the contractor making modifications to those barriers so that we will then have to survey the operators to see whether or not it made the improvements that we hope it would have resulted in. Secondly, we did meet last week as a group with the operators, and we discussed what support services do they need if they are involved in an assault situation. And through that discussion, we're going to make several improvements in process. and provide them more resources should that be the situation. That's still work that's underway. They're not all resolved, but the end goal is to do that. And when that happens, I will certainly update you with what specific actions we're actually taking to improve that situation.
Questions?
Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay.
So if you'd like, I was hoping actually to just continue with a quick update on the state transportation package and other issues underway with the Oregon legislature this year. As you know, there is a lot of energy being focused on the state transportation package. So there has been a joint committee on transportation preservation and modernization. And they've been having hearings, working on proposals for actually provide more funding for transportation, including for transit. The bill is being drafted and expected to be available next week. So we understand that public hearings on that are scheduled for May 31st and June 5th. We've had a number of visits with those legislatures, both board members as well as community members. On Monday was actually the task force, Mr. Board President, you referred to really on the low-income fare. Actually, many members for that task force were down advocating for the transportation funding package and inclusion of funding for transit that would enable that low-income fare program to be initiated. So we're quite optimistic about where all of that is, but obviously there's still a lot of work to be done. Let me run through a few other bills of interest for TriMet. House Bill 3202 is the Southwest Corridor Land Use Bill, and this really creates the same sort of process that we've had for every other light rail line from the west side through the south-north project that included the yellow line and the orange line and the green line. Allows that same sort of expedited land use appeals process that's necessary for a federal funding process to be successful and timely. That bill has passed out of committee last week and is now in Ways and Means awaiting action. And it does seem to be strong support for the bill, so we expect it to be approved ultimately. There was some reference earlier to what is actually now known as House Bill 2777. That would allow us to move handling fare violations in-house. It's actually passed out of the House Judiciary Committee on March 21st, passed on the House floor by a vote of 54 in favor to 5 against on March 29th, and is now in Senate Judiciary. We had a successful hearing on April 25th, and there's a work session scheduled for May 30th. And strong support for the bill, and we expect it to be approved ultimately as well. House Bill 2717 increases the penalty for assaulting a transit employee related to Perry's just recent report. It passed out of the House Judiciary Committee on April 6th, and it's now in Ways and Means awaiting action. A couple other bills of interest. Senate Bill 357 lowers the penalty for interfering with public transit from a misdemeanor A to C, and that passed out of Senate Judiciary on April 18th. SB 357 passed the Senate floor and most likely move out of House Judiciary this week. I'd also just note that really is in line with the work that we've done with the district attorneys in all 3 counties that was referenced in your earlier remarks as well, related to interfering with public transit. Senate Bill 121, a bill to direct TriMet to study light rail to Forest Grove, passed out of the Senate Business and Transportation on April 17th and has moved to Ways and Means awaiting action. So we'll keep you updated on all of this as we continue. And finally, at your last meeting briefing, we went through the business plan. We put that out for public comment. We offered you the opportunity to comment on it. Comments were received, and we have now our final version, if you will, to present to you. And so I wanted to bring up both Alan Nato and Doug Kelsey, who have really been the champions behind the hard work associated with that, for a very short presentation on this.
All
So we'll just jump into this, and it'll probably take about 3 to 4 minutes.
Thanks, Doug. Mr. President, members of the board, we updated you last month and previously on the business plan, so this will be quick. As you know, we've talked about this strategy map, this set of 12 goals that clearly articulate how we're trying to move towards our vision, mission, and values to do our part to make this the best place to live in the country. The point of the business plan is to give us more guidance and to align our efforts at all levels in the agency. It provides those 12 goals that cover the range of strategic needs for TriMet. It provides 39 specific objectives to help clarify those goals and 64 key strategic actions to pursue and to make progress over the 5 years of the lifetime of this plan, which will be a rolling update every year of a 5-year plan. You've seen examples. I'd just point out, for example, Objective 14, which clarifies our focus on reliable performance, a measure of on-time performance, and specifically identifies targets for each of our modes, and identifies some key strategic actions, including some of what Doug was talking about earlier, to continue to improve and make those targets. Neil mentioned the comments on the draft, not wide-ranging, but some specific ones that we definitely needed to make updates to. We added some definitions. We added to Director Bauman's question some information about employees with disabilities that are covered in a separate plan that's kind of under the umbrella of this. We added a little bit more focus on Lyft paratransit, which will be a strategy and an effort going forward. And then some minor efforts, including making sure that the web links were corrected in there. So all incorporated for that final version that you have in front of you for FY 18 through 22. Our next steps are to take this overall agency vision and turn it into the vehicle for creating alignment at all levels within TriMet. So we'll be rolling it out with divisions and departments. There are many TriMet employees who were involved in this, but of course not all of them were able to. And so now the detail work begins of identifying how each of our actions help support the overall agency need to make these improvements. Our timeline is the final report right now, and then during this coming fiscal year to do that first year of implementation, make sure that people are aligning along these efforts. Much of what we're doing is already aligned, but to do it more consciously and to make sure that we are focusing where we need to be to really make progress. We're expecting to bring twice yearly updates on measures back to this board so that you can track how we're doing. And starting in the fall, we'll, of course, start thinking about the update for FY19 as we continue to work on implementing it for this year.
The only thing I would perhaps add is just to not, for management, is we are not going to underestimate the significance of the communication challenge and the alignment challenge. Again, a tremendous amount of initiatives are already embedded in before this business plan. They're being taken advantage of. We're just not starting from zero. So we're leveraging a bunch of existing work, but there is a alignment. We want to make sure, we've got to make sure that this thing, it sticks from the conversation to the individuals on the shop floor, to our great bus operators, train operators, through an IT and planning and engineering. So there's a pervasiveness that says, look, here's the alignment of the areas of focus, which will also help us determine where we want to spend less time. So it will help us, I think, get that message out, create the cause for a business plan, why a business plan. Some people haven't worked with business plans before. They need to be part of this. And so we just don't want to underestimate the significance of the communication piece that's going to, that we will be undertaking here over the next number of months. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have or comments.
I think we're good. Thank you very much. That's a very quick and thorough report.
Thank you.
That concludes my report, unless there are any questions the board has on miscellaneous items.
No, I just want to make one comment. I think Kim Howell may still be in the room talking about some of the large congestion relief projects that are being talked about in the legislature. And I just want anybody watching this to understand the context that I had the opportunity to sit on the governor's Transportation Vision Task Force that went around the state and talked about transportation priorities. The Joint Transportation Committee you made reference to at the legislature did the same thing. And what they heard, the number one priority for folks around the state were getting through the city of Portland and the Portland metro region with their goods and services. And that congestion in this area was a huge economic risk and problem for them, and the state agrees. And so the legislature's looking at what needs to be done. So I want to stress for Jim that those projects they're talking about are of statewide significance. Our job in terms of congestion management is clearly to help get folks out of their cars and use other modes to further aid. But I believe that, again, it's very clear that those major routes, I-5, I-84, I-205, and 217, are an impediment to businesses around the entire state. And so that's what's driving that dialogue. And I just wanted to get that onto the record this morning. All right, we ready to move on then to the consent agenda? All right, on the consent agenda, for anybody watching, these are items that are considered routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member can remove an item from the consent portion of the agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to the consideration of this portion of the agenda. I will point out that we have 6 items on our agenda this morning: approval of our minutes from the April 26th meeting, a resolution authorizing transfer of appropriated funds within the FY 217 general fund budget, just truing up our budget to reflect actual expenses. There's a resolution regarding multicultural outreach engagement services, flexible service contracts with a number of firms, mostly minority owned and related to community outreach in particular areas. A resolution authorizing 2 contracts with Broadway Cab for lift program and supplemental transportation services. A resolution authorizing a contract with Ross Builders for the Merlot bus maintenance and administration operator buildings and exterior painting project. And then finally, a resolution authorizing a contract with Russell Construction for the Merlot bus garage window replacement project. So those are the items. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the board would like to have removed for consideration or has questions? Seeing none, then, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
There a motion and a second? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? None. The motion is approved unanimously. I would point out, Mr. General Manager, that I think that third item I mentioned in terms of the outreach services, that's one I hope that maybe we can have a dialogue about how we might be able to use those in our budget process next year to make sure some of those interest groups that these folks are specifically tied to can have more feeling like there's more opportunities for participation in our budget.
Absolutely, and indeed, that's the reason for those contracts, is
Right.
to make sure that we do a better job of connecting
All right.
communities throughout the region.
Thank you. All right, then let's move on to our resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution 17-05-42, which is adopting the fiscal year 2017-2018 annual budget and appropriating funds. Mr. General Manager?
Mr. Board President, members of the board, with me is Dee Brookshire, our Chief Financial Officer, for any hard questions, who I can volley her way. But I would just note that the budget is actually bringing together a number of processes that really that run throughout the whole year. Recall that we start with public outreach and discussion about our service plans. And that is even backstopped by our service enhancement planning effort, which has a great citizen involvement effort associated with it too. So there is a process that really looks at the service elements and the improvements to service that are called for, and we have a very broad outreach program associated with that. And then there is the sort of the business side of the budget as well. And on the business side of the budget, we begin with the board, and this actually started, I believe, in October of last year, where we asked you to begin to think about the themes that the budget needed to respond to. and you actually adopted and approved those late in 2016. Those themes, I should note, are safety, implementing the service enhancement plans, maintaining and preserving the system, improving system reliability, building ridership through quality service and innovation, and advancing regional corridor projects. I do believe this budget is responsive to those same themes in many different ways. But I'd also just note in terms of the process, what happens then is that we actually then take those themes, send them out to our departments. We get budget proposals back. We sift through those, and we actually then provide a draft budget for you to review, and we did that in mid-March this year, and it's also put out to the public at the same time for comment and discussion. I'd also note that we have the process that you went through this year with the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, public hearing associated with that. That meeting was held on April 24th. And again, TSCC certified the budget, and I think, as usual, described it as a clear and an easy to understand document from a technical standpoint, and is in compliance with all Oregon and important rules and regulations. So that brings the budget before you for consideration and adoption. Just to summarize the budget, the big line numbers are day-to-day operations, about $534.7 million. There's another payment that the federal government owes us on the orange line that adds another $100 million. That's really just paying back TriMet for money borrowed in the past. Capital and operating projects total $203 million. A lot of that is grant-related funding. There's a pass-through that we often do with other agencies of about $6.6 million, and then fund balance and contingency at about $355 million. So it's about a $1.2 billion total bottom line, but important to understand those pieces because not all of those numbers are continuing, and many of those numbers will change every year as the situation comes up. Related to safety service, the theme of safety, we have a number of grade crossing improvements that are capital improvements in the budget this year. We also have improvements to the CCTV system, and we have a number of training efforts underway, one of which Doug mentioned related to rail operator training and increased operator training overall. Related to service, we will be expanding bus service hours by 3.42% in 2018. You might note that the goal of the Regional Transportation Plan is that we expand service at about 2.1 a year. So we're overperforming on that goal, which is a good thing. And that is, again, because of your support of that payroll tax increase that is ramping up over a 10-year period. So that includes the increment. We actually have approximately $5 million annualized in new service in this budget. And we believe that we're on the course of continuing to grow that service year after year as the new payroll tax revenues fall into place. And indeed, there's also, as I think Doug also mentioned, a number of initiatives related to reliability, certainly training, improvements to the system, the kinds of things that we did at Morrison Yamhill. All of those things will contribute to reliability overall. We also add time to bus schedules so they can be more predictable, given the fact that congestion is beginning to congeal our roadway network a bit more, making it harder for our operators to hit their schedules. And so we need to adjust for that as well. A number of capital improvements are included in the budget. They, of course, include completing the electronic fare system with its automatic best fare capping system associated with it. Some of the safety improvements I noted, the construction of our Powell lift facility, as well as our beginning the construction or reconstruction of our Powell bus maintenance facility. We are fixing and replacing Blue Line station elevators. We have a Blue Line station rehabilitation project, which is funding annually as we can afford the rehabilitation of the lines of the stations really from Hollywood East. And we do include in the budget the partnership with Prosper Portland for a new dispatch and precinct facility for our police in the Lloyd District, about 2,000 feet from the current facility. I'd also note that with FTA support, we will be improving some safety provisions around the Orange Line, 8th, 11th, and 12th, and helping the UP Railroad expedite their trains through that area as well, improving the safety of those crossings and the efficiency of those crossings. So those are all included in the capital program, as well as some of the topics that we'll touch on later in the agenda, including some of the improvements of track and lift joints on the steel bridge and the switches and the signal performance at either end of the steel bridge. So those are major improvements that will be part of the work ahead. As you know, the budget was developed in alignment with the strategic financial plans that the board has adopted. Particularly Board Members Stovall and Prosser put a lot of time and energy into that, and I wanted to just sort of, we have in the past given you a full report on the alignment of those policies with the budget alignment with those policies. Just to emphasize that our debt service is well below the 6% threshold that you've set. And our one-time only revenues are cleanly separated from our continuing revenues. We've enhanced our pension funding as called for in that plan. And we are now at a 72% rate for our union funding plan, 86% for the non-union. And again, consistent with the pension funding policies the board adopted as part of that plan. With that, Dee is willing, if you're willing, to actually walk through the changes between the proposed and the adopted budget, or any discussion that you may wish to have at this point in time.
And those changes are in our packet, right?
Correct, and those are the ones that the Finance and Audit Committee reviewed this morning.
Right. So what's the pleasure of the board? Would you like her to walk through those changes so we have those on the record too, or are we feeling comfortable? You'd like to? Okay.
Yes, I'd like to. Okay. We'll start with the resource budget changes. The resources and the requirements both all balance changes totaling $48.9 million from the approved budget to the adopted budget. We increased the beginning fund balance of restricted bond proceeds and other restricted due to the e-fair project carryover. This wasn't unexpected. It's an $11.7 million increase in resources. Increased debt service beginning fund balance for 2017 revenue bond interest payment of $1.8 million. This is related to a subsequent resolution for a future bonding issue. Increased the unrestricted beginning fund balance as a result of the updated projections for fiscal 2017 capital and operating projects carryover of $8.4 million. We decreased the advertising budget to reflect current projections by $51,000. We increased accessible transportation contract to reflect current projections of $588,000. We decreased other federal, state, and local operating grants for revised estimates of $188,970. Increased our CIP resources by $23.8 million for our Milwaukee Light Rail project, and remaining $2.8 million due to carryover changes. That was due to a late action by FTA to approve some additional project work on PMLR. So the final one is the decreased pass-through resource to reflect current projections of $64,000. Moving to the requirement budget changes, or the changes to the expenditure side of the budget, we increased funds to the M&S for utility changes and card reader upgrades, $263,664. We increased funds to reflect our current OPEB and pension UAAL costs by $4,422. We increased debt service for 2017 revenue bond interest payment change and capitalized leases, $1.9 million. We increased the CIP by $25.7 million due to the timing of operating and capital improvement program expenses. rollover of fiscal year 2017 projects to fiscal year 2018 by $25.6 million, decreased pass-through requirements to reflect current projections by $64,000. We increased our contingency to reflect 3% of all the other changes, which came to $67,033. We increased restricted bond proceeds and other restricted ending fund balances due to reflect remaining bond funds of $13.5 million. We decreased restricted funds for debt service by $9.6 million, and we increased unrestricted ending fund balance by $17.1 million due to a change in the project resources due to the carryover. Any questions on any of that?
Any questions on any other parts of the budget, or certainly happy to respond?
I don't see any other questions right at the moment. Do we want to get a motion on the table and then have a discussion of the budget? Is there a motion then to approve Resolution 17-05-42?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion on the budget. Again, we heard a lot of testimony this morning. I'd like to maybe get some things on the record there, but any other comments? Or yes.
First, I want to thank staff for all their hard work. You know, having built public sector budgets for my entire career, I know how difficult it is and how time-consuming it is. You know, the work of our finance folks, but also of our operating divisions, pulling information together. It is a massive amount of work, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do, so thank you. I do want to say one thing, and Dr. Bethel mentioned in his comments something that I think is very important, and that is that if we see things that we don't understand, it's really important that we talk to each other to get clear information. Doesn't mean that we're going to end up necessarily agreeing, but at least we're all working off the same information. I want to say that there are no funds in this budget for a jail. None. TriMet is not authorized to build or operate a jail. In this state, the state maintains the prisons. Those are for long-term incarceration of serious offenses. The counties operate the jails. So over there at the Justice Center, the top floors, that's where the jail is. Police offices in smaller cities and in Portland have the precincts have holding cells. And those are cells for temporary holding of people prior to booking. And it's to allow the officer to sit down and write the report so they can take it with the person over to central booking, which in this case is in the Justice Center. The holding cells must be operated according to federal rules and regulations. One of those is that nobody can be put in a holding cell for longer than 24 hours. I talked with Harry Supporter this morning and asked how long people are typically put in the existing holding cells, because the facility we are replacing has 2 holding cells. The facility we will build will have 2 holding cells. And Harry told me that with his observation, people are in there for maybe an hour. Could be a little longer, a little less. So that is far different than a jail. And, you know, I think all of this discussion, you know, people have gotten upset, and I really understand why, that TriMet is trying to up enforcement, you know, create more police. Our system is growing and expanding, and that by itself will create the need for more police officers over time. The existing facility is undersized, cramped, has severe maintenance problems, and is not owned by TriMet. It's leased from the city of Portland. And it doesn't make a lot of sense for TriMet to invest capital money in that facility, which cannot be any larger than it is, to fix the maintenance problems. And so we are going to be building a new precinct in the Rose Quarter. It will be larger. There will be more room for officers as we grow over time. We're not going to all of a sudden have a military force come in and start riding our buses. It will have 2 holding cells. People will be held there very short term while paperwork is being processed. I've also heard a lot of concern that there will be interrogation rooms. The interrogation room is a conference room with a table and chairs, a little more secure. My experience at the city of Tigard, which also has holding cells, which also has interrogation room, which is also a conference room. There are differences between a regular conference room and an interrogation room, in Tigard at least, was it had 2 separate entrances. It does have video and sound recording capabilities in it. But that's really it. So unfortunately, I think we've had a lot of concern and people are upset. And, you know, when the concern first occurred to folks, if they would talk to staff, to TriMet, and make sure that we're working off the same information. You know, with that in mind, I will be supporting this because I think it is a needed facility. I think this is a good budget. And so I will intend on voting aye.
I'll just make a quick statement. I appreciate Director Prosser's clarifying the record. I think he's laid out the reality of this particular item in the budget that has become an issue of concern. It's not a jail. It's a needed facility that will just continue a role that TriMet has played. There isn't a plan right now to increase the transit police force, for example. In my view, this budget advances the principles that TriMet displays in all of its operations, and those are equity, excellent service to all customers, and safety of all customers and employees. TriMet is also a good steward of public resources, and I do support the budget.
It's with a heavy heart that I respond to some of the comments that were made this morning. As most of you can tell, I am a man of color. And to sit here sometimes and listen to the accusations that are made is very difficult, extremely difficult, because it calls into question really where my heart and where my passion lies. And I can tell you right now, I know where it lies, and I know where my heart and my passion is directed. Is there a problem in our great nation in regards to how we many times treat people of color? Well, that answer is yes. I live it, I experience it every single day. And what sometimes pains me gravely is when people use us as examples to push forward an agenda that they have not lived. So folks, am I frustrated? I'm extremely hurt by the notion that I sit here and I would push forward an agenda that does not include moving forward the efforts of colored people in the United States of America. Now, it's been said and it's been stated that over the last 5 years, we have not listened. I would say that's a mischaracterization. when folks like Vivian and people like Jared asked me to sit down and listen to them when we were working on the 3-hour transfer. I did that multiple times. To say that we did not listen to our riderships, our stakeholders, and move forward with an effort to expand the transfer times would be incorrect and inaccurate. As a matter of fact, I was told on multiple occasions, if we did this, we would increase our ridership. This would be a direct contributor to increased ridership, but now we get told that it's our fault that ridership is decreasing because we're not listening. When we moved to the board 5 years ago, one of the things that we experienced was something similar to what we saw today. When we increased the fare up to $2.50. Well, part of this board's efforts and the staff efforts and the ATU's efforts over the last 5 years has allowed us not only to increase the transfer time from 2 hours to 2.5 hours, which is in effect a decrease in fare, but the fare has been the same for 5 years because of the dedication, because of the many hours that this board, again, this incredible staff, and the ATU have been dedicated to moving forward efforts to ensure that this community is well taken care of from a transit perspective. Now, I could not go a minute longer without mentioning Mr. Terrell Johnson. Because ultimately, when someone loses their life in these situations, it's a tragedy. It is absolutely a tragedy. But again, to use Mr. Terrell Johnson sometimes in the way that we have sometimes used him, in my opinion, folks, is not honoring this man's life or his death. I know my fellow board members. I know them well. I've shared with them. I've spent time with them. We've had heartaches together. We've had challenges. We've had situations where we've had an opportunity to celebrate. And I can tell you right now that each of these individuals are committed from the deepest bottoms of their heart to move this agency in a way that makes sure we're taking care of the folks that depend on us every single day. Every single day. They're volunteers. Volunteers. Now, many of you, this is the first time I've ever seen your faces, and I greatly, greatly appreciate you being so dedicated, so passionate, so moved with emotion to come and address this board. It's not easy to do. You've taken time out of your busy days to make this trek to this event, and that I am more than grateful. I appreciate that, and I ask that you continue to be engaged at this level. Now, have we dropped the ball in instances? I can guarantee you we have. Are we committed to making sure that those situations where we haven't listened as well, enhance and improve? My answer to that is yes. Yes, I am absolutely committed to that. Over the last 5 years, we actually implemented the TAC, the Transit Equity Council, so that we have an opportunity for further dialogue and this inclusion, this collaboration that we've talked about. So as I wrap my comments up, I can tell you right now, you have your perspective of who I am and what I've done and the things that we look to move forward. And I know I have to wake up every single morning. I have to come to this meeting, I have to look every single one of you in the eye and know that I'm making decisions that are going to move this organization forward in a way that does, in my opinion, one focused thing. That is giving the people of our community, our stakeholders, our riders, the ability to move from poverty to prosperity and maintain that. To give people access to jobs, because that is the pure way that we are going to raise our folks to a level that they can contribute to society and they can get a living wage to support themselves and their families. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I've seen. You know, in some situations, folks like myself who are African Americans, especially African American males, who make it out of inner city, very troubled situations, sometimes look back and say, you know, I've made it out so everybody else can. Well, I will tell you right now, I do not hold that belief. Not everybody, absolutely not everybody has the same opportunities. I use one word when I talk about getting out of the inner city, and that's luck. Absolutely luck. It wasn't my own volition. It wasn't anything that I did. Someone gave me an opportunity. Someone saw a possibility, and they gave me that. I have lost numerous friends to gun violence. I know what it's like to lose people, not just friends, but also relatives. I've been there. I still exist in this arena of violence, and I can tell you it's my deepest passion to see it end. So, with that, I want to again thank everybody for coming out. Huey, thank you for your leadership with Opal and BRU. I thank everybody for your dedication, for your commitment to coming out and sharing what your thoughts are with us, with the deep passion and emotion that you've come to us with. I will implore each and every one of you to not take away that I am angry at you or angry at any of the conversations we had in regards to moving forward what we have to move forward. But more so, my discontent comes from a deep feeling of cognitive dissonance where I sit here and I listen to what I'm being accused of and know down deep inside that that is not true, that I am absolutely committed, that I work tirelessly to ensure everything that you've presented is what we are working on doing. I gave you just a few examples to how we've worked together, how we've been successful, and how we will continue to be successful. So, with that, I do not see the building of the detention center as an extension of the efforts to either hold down or continue to go after people of color. That is not my opinion. We move forward, we focus on short-term needs, medium-term needs, and long-term needs. Each of them need to be considered as we're working from a financial perspective, as we're working in your efforts to move forward this agency in a way that really positively communicates or contributes to this community. I know I've been long-winded this morning, but I appreciate your attention, and I greatly, again, appreciate everybody's efforts as we continue to work together to make sure this agency is one that can be a shining star, that can lead in its efforts to ensure that everybody has equal opportunity. Thank you.
Beth, don't you have some comments?
Yes. First of all, let me thank Travis for saying a whole lot, so that means I only need to say take half the amount of time. Because truly for me, there are some times really, I'll tell you, that I really want to get up and walk out of the board when we have to listen to these accusations, particularly for me being an African-American man being charged of saying you don't care about your own people, and that is not true. When you talk about the loss of the death of Tyrone Johnson, for almost 2 decades, I've walked in this city fighting for police reform and accountability. And when you say no guns to transit police, I never heard your voice when Kidney James was killed saying we didn't need any guns. I didn't even hear your voice when you found out that Keaton Otis was shot nearly 20 times for being in a car that somebody thought he did not fit to drive. There were no screams that police don't need to have guns. Department of Justice has been in town for a number of years now. And you say, well, the city of Portland decided to call them in. No. Really want to know who initiated that first? Take a look at me. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because it's a real fact that our coalition is the first one who asked for that. And I didn't see a lot of your faces who were complaining about not having police. We're going to have police. It's the accountability and reforms that we need. And you can't throw it all on TriMet because of what happened. It's tragic. I am tired of the tragedies of the loss of life, but it's not TriMet. It's a whole system, and our system has to be worked on, and your voices are needed to help us with voicing that about the system. Director Opal, I believe, said, I'm not going to argue with you in his last month's meeting, I believe, statement, which I thought was the best statement I've ever heard in my time of sitting on this board from Opal. It wasn't derogatory. It wasn't trying to be intimidated. It was trying to speak to issues. And he says, I'm not going to argue with you about the semantics of jail, but realize that the choice of words do incite people. And the reflections or not mentioning of certain words, but implications also incite people. How many times has TriMet jailed folk? How many officer-involved shootings that end in death or injury has been on TriMet's lines as compared to what happens in the city of Portland or any other cities? So when we bring all the facts together, we can't just single out one. We have to put them all together and then unite our voices and say, this must end. In terms of this budget, for replacing that worn-down facility that is cramped and needs to be placed in another situation, another area, I'm fully supported because I realize that it is not trying to go after people, find people, lock them up, throw them in, those types of things. So I'm going to support this budget, and I fully support the relocation of the TriMet Transit Police Facility to be placed under the new building that's going to be in the Lord area next to the convention center. I don't think that placing it there would have created or would have been something that would make Portland not become a good city, because why would all the investors agree to take the money? You can say, well, it's only because they want to make more money. No, because they believe, and also I believe, value safety. And while a gun does not make us all safe, while police don't make us safe, understand that when I walk out of here and get in my vehicle and drive, I have to wonder, will I make it? But I don't measure and I don't focus on that. I focus on trying to do the best that I can to help as many people as I can, so that my living will not be in vain if I can help somebody along this journey. And I am fully committed to doing that since before coming on this board, while I've been on this board, and until the day I draw my last breath, I will be trying to help people along the journey, regardless of your ethnic hue. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, I don't think I can follow these two. I guess I need to go on record and say I'm going to support this budget, and I will support relocation of the transit police facility from what I consider really quite poor facilities over to a new facility on the east side. And I'm hoping that actually Mr. General Manager and the staff involved in working with the architects as we move forward in this, I hope that we can maybe change the perception of this building, because downtown is not welcoming at all if you look at the facility. I think in the interest of community policing, community engagement, this should be a facility that frankly is welcoming to the community and encourages folks from the community to utilize it and come in and actually interact with the police in that area. So I think there's a golden opportunity here for us to change the way people think about this, and I hope you'll involve some of the various stakeholders who we may have heard from this morning about how to, again, make that facility more inviting and again, help us accomplish what we need, but also help them accomplish ways to again, build that community and help everybody throughout the Portland region. I was struck by the testimony this morning and the comments from our board here today, and I hope that as we move forward, we can continue our training to help de-escalate both with our staff and with the TriMet police agencies, because there are issues out there and there's problems out there, and I think it's been said here, we're part of the system, and so we need to help lead whenever we can, and I think this is a great opportunity where we might be able to show some leadership and help. So that's my comments this morning. Any further comments from the board regarding the budget? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-42, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on to Resolution 17-05-43, which is authorizing modifications to the streetcar master agreement and streetcar operating agreement with the City of Portland.
Board President, members of the board, as you know, our history has been that right after our budget is adopted, we update the agreement with Portland Streetcar, Inc., our partner in operating the Portland Streetcar. Indeed, you know that our operators and maintenance staff actually contribute to the operation, actually operate the streetcars themselves. That's supplemented by other staff that's provided by the City of Portland, so it's a combined operation with a share of costs that are really defined by master agreement that you approved some years ago. So for this year, we do see a few puts and takes associated with that agreement. But fundamentally, pretty much a flat bottom line number, moving from fiscal year 2017, 7.5 million to about 7.6 million for the 2018 budget. This will continue the services of the streetcar at about the same level that we currently have. I would just note that with staff, we are working to see if we can actually enhance some of the early morning hours on the north-south line. That may be a modification or may be able to be accomplished within the resources we see here. But we continue to work, I think, very collaborative, very in a great partnership with the City of Portland and Portland Streetcar, Inc., which actually is the oversight body associated with the Portland Streetcar. So happy to answer any questions. I'd also note that in future years, as we begin to transition to the HOP Fast Pass, some of the puts and takes you see associated with the agreement will change because we'll know specifically what the share of fare revenue that we owe streetcar is, as opposed to current TriMet passengers transferring to the streetcar. So we'll have much better information, much direct information that will lead to direct payments related to the split of that fare revenue. With that, be happy to answer any questions, and I also would like to thank Dan Caulfield, who's here, who has spent a great deal of time. One footnote, as we transition to fiscal year 19, we're looking at basing this on an hourly cost of our operation, which we think will be much more advantageous, and it will allow, for example, the City of Portland to add staff if they think it's necessary, and not have an argument with us about the cost of the streetcar operation per hour. So we'll brief you further on that as we transition and develop those agreements, but just to note, we have some transitions afoot that I think are actually advantageous and clearer in terms of their future implementation.
Any questions on this one? Seeing none, is there then a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-43?
So moved.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-43, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Let's move on then to Resolution 17-05-44, which is authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds.
Mr. Mr. Board President, members of the board, we've briefed you before on this regional initiative associated with recent allocations of Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program dollars, MTIP dollars, by Metro. And over the last year, there's been some migration in this program based on a reduction of expected revenues to the metropolitan area. But with that, we've been able to negotiate an agreement with Metro that still allows some of the really key initiatives that were originally anticipated to move forward. And that is an important agreement. It was approved by Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation on May 18th. What that will allow is a stream of funds to come to TriMet. And TriMet is agreeing to bring, should you approve this resolution, agreeing to bring those funds forward so that they can be used in the short term for important transportation improvements. Those improvements that we will be funding as a result would be $25 million of local match for the Division Transit Project. That will be combined with revenues and resources from TriMet, from the City of Portland, and ultimately from the Federal Transit Administration to create much new bus rapid transit line. The Southwest Corridor, there's $15 million for draft environmental impact statement and preliminary and engineering work and cost estimating associated with that project. Again, ODOT, the JPAC resolution included $10 million for ODOT's project development work for some key highway congestion reduction projects that the board president mentioned earlier, and also funds for safe routes to school. So what this resolution does, and Dee can go into any of the details associated with it, is really make good on that agreement with Metro by beginning, by authorizing the bonding of those funds that will allow us to advance funds ultimately for those projects. And I might note that there is a little bit of budget adjustments that go into this associated with we may not, the funds will be coming to TriMet and we'll be using it for, at various points in time, important TriMet investments. But at the end of the day, this is enabling those projects that we have listed here. We did review this with the Finance and Audit Committee again this morning. And Dee, perhaps you'd like to add a note about the resolution itself.
The specifics are that this particular resolution will authorize us to move forward to establish the bond issue that would provide $51 million for the projects that Neil has just described, plus the cost of issuance and capitalized interest to bring the funds forward. The funding stream, the new funding stream, won't actually begin until 2019, but there's a need for the funds in 2017. So we'll be capitalizing interest, but we expect that not to exceed a grand total of $55 million. So this will start the 60-day clock running, which we're required by Oregon budget law to do, on a new money issue. This would be new money to TriMet. It would be, the collateral will be the new MTIP funding, federal funding. So we would expect to be in the market probably in September for this particular issue. We have an opportunity to combine this issue with a refunding of the 2011 bonds, which is also supported by the same type of MTIP federal funding. I just received word from our underwriters this morning that currently the market shows potential savings of 4.47% or an additional 3.6 million. So if these conditions continue, we'll be combining a refunding with the new money issue. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions from the board?
So just so that we're looking at this from a clear perspective, when we say MTIP funding, or Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, MTIP funding, in the sense, isn't necessarily TriMet's normal funding cycle from the federal government, if I'm asking the question correctly. I mean, we get various funds from the federal government, but the MTIP funding is primarily controlled by the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, JPAC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And these bonds will then be backed by those future revenues?
They will be primarily backed by those. They will be secondarily backed by our own 5307 federal funding. Because that's the same combination of collateral that we used on the 2011 bonds, so we would continue that. This is an A-rated issue, but because it's federally funded, it's not a AAA-rated issue, like the rest of TriMet's are, but it's still a very good rating, and it's still a substantially important project. It's CMAQ funding combined with the JPAC-controlled 5307.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
You know, I would like to note one more thing, and that is that there is another action that's embedded in this resolution. That's the intent to reimburse ourselves for any money that's spent from the time that this is approved until we actually bond. So that is number 7, intent to reimburse, so.
And that means we may expend funds or release funds before the actual bond proceeds are received?
Yes, the ODOT and the Safe Routes to School in particular, but also our own projects, they're eager to spend money starting July 1st. And so in order for us to be able to cover those expenditures with the bond proceeds, we have to have what's called, in my world, a reach-back resolution to allow us to cover those expenditures with bond proceeds, even if the bond is issued at a later date.
So it's primarily an issue with timing?
Correct.
Of when funds need to be expended and when funds need to be received, but it's more of a housekeeping item that we need to make sure that it's included in the actual resolution to ensure that that's the proper way of accounting for all the funds as they move back and forth.
Exactly.
I see no other questions. Is there then a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-44?
So move.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-44, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Let's move on then to Resolution 17-05-45, which is authorizing a modification to the contract with CH2M Hill for design services for the Steel Bridge Transit Improvements Project.
So, Mr. Board President, members of the board, we underestimated originally what was going to be involved in the work to rehabilitate our track work and lift joints, switches at either end, and signal system associated with the steel bridge. And if you watch Max service alerts, you do note that there very often is a service problem associated with one of the switches at one end of the steel bridge or another. And so as we got into the engineering work, we discovered that our original scope of work, frankly, was inadequate to really address all the issues that we had, both short-term and long-term. So there were two elements of this contract with CH2M Hill. One was the short-term series of improvements that will be constructed really over the next couple of years that replace the track work, the lift joints, and the switches associated with the steel bridge area. What we had discovered as we got into the design that a great deal of additional drainage work was also going to be required, and that the whole sort of the invasive nature of the work began to grow. So yes, this might be like remodeling a bathroom in a 1908 house, because that's about the age of this bridge. And so because of that, we are asking for a modification of the contract to allow additional funds to be spent on the design effort. I'd also note on the short-term design effort, I'll also note that we've also had the same sort of issue associated with a portion of the study that Board Member Prosser has, I think, been a champion of, which is looking at what is the long-term future connection on that edge of downtown. And so the number of alternatives that we're looking at have grown, everything from a tunnel to other new bridges to using other bridges that are in the vicinity. So we'll certainly continue to bring you up to date on this work, and we briefed you earlier this summer, I believe, or earlier this year, excuse me, on the progress on this work. But the bottom line is that we are recommending a modification of the contract, moving up from $800,000 to $1,620,000. And with that, we believe we can complete the work satisfactorily. I'd also note that CH2M has indicated a 15% MBE, DBE veterans participation in the overall program. We believe actually we can work with CH2M to actually improve that over time, but they certainly are achieving that commitment as work progresses. Again, this work is within the budget as proposed, and as is the capital work that would follow. So with that, recommend your approval, and certainly either I or Steve Witter or others would be happy to answer any questions for you.
Do I have any questions from the board?
As Neil noted and the board well knows, I've had concerns about the steel bridge for a very long time. It's interesting that we have 21st century technology dependent on early 20th century construction, and it's not surprising that we have continuing problems on that bridge. So I'm really pleased about we're looking at concepts for long-term improvements. I was kind of stunned, I must admit, to see that we went from 4 to 22, so it shows a lot of creativeness, so good job. And the sooner we get to identifying those options and the preferred option, the better, because we've got to do this. We've got to fix this bridge so that we can get our service across it. But we're draining money for something that isn't really going to get that much better, and can't. But just because of that disparity between it was built and what the way we use it now. So I'm supportive of this.
Good comments. Other comments, questions?
No questions.
All right. Well, then there's a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-45.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-42. Excuse me, I'm on the wrong one, I think. Let's try that again.
45.
Should be 45, yes.
45, right?
Did I say 42?
Yeah.
I'll get to it yet here. So Resolution 45, yes. Let's do a motion again. Is it motion?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
And a second, okay. All those then in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-45, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Moving on then to Resolution 17-05-46, which is authorizing a contract with Stacy and Whitbeck Incorporated for construction manager / general contractor services for the Steel Bridge transit improvements and deck rehabilitation project.
So speaking of the steel bridge, this is the contractor to actually implement the design work that you considered in the last resolution. And again, what we are looking for is a longer-term arrangement with Stacy and Whitbeck to take on these projects over a sequential period of time. What you're approving, should you approve it, or considering, is a contract that actually is for pre-construction services of around $126,000. But again, it would be our intention to come back to you and modify this contract for the actual value of the construction work, which in the ultimate, at the end of the day, we believe will be worth about $20 million. So it is a big contract. It's a lot of work. It will take place over a number of years so we can minimize the impact to our operations and to our customers. But again, we're very fortunate, I think, to have Stacy and Whitbeck recommended here. As you noted in the background of the memo, we actually, at the end of the day, only received one proposal, very satisfactory proposal, but again, for various reasons, other firms that did attend and did draw down the documents, did attend our pre-construction conference, chose not to actually participate. I would also note Stacy and Whitbeck was the contractor that just did our 11th Avenue turnaround work, did an extraordinarily good job. And they have a great history of working with our community and disadvantaged businesses in their work. So with that, we strongly recommend the approval of this contract, and again, look forward to working with Stacy and Redback to implement these additional improvements. And please, happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions by the board? Fairly straightforward. And then is the board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-46?
So move. Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-46, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. Let's move on to Resolution 17-05-47, authorizing a contract with WSP USA Administration, Inc. for final design services for the Division Transit Project. Mr. General Manager, maybe you could tell us who WSP is, too, for the record.
So, Mr. Board President, members of the board, very pleased to be able to offer this contract to you. It was a result of a very competitive request for proposals process. WSP is otherwise known, previously known as Parsons Brinkerhoff, which is a very familiar name and a firm that we've had a long-running relationship in terms of design services, including for our West Side Tunnel many years ago. So again, there's a lot of threads that run through your agenda. You approved the budget. You approved the bonding of the potential MTIP funds that develop funding for the Division Transit Project. This is a design contract for that Division contract project. And I think it's clear that Parsons, or Parsons Brinkerhoff, or WSP, now known, has a great deal of experience designing similar BRT-style projects in many other communities around the country, including in Oregon, Eugene, and bring a great deal of experience to this task. And it will be a difficult task because I think we've got a relatively limited budget for 14 miles of service. So we really do need a great deal of creativity as we move through this project to make sure that we provide all the travel advantages and customer service that we want to provide within the budget that's allocated. We went through the procurement process. As you know, we also had very good, fine proposals from AECOM, which is another firm that we have worked with many times in the past. WSP indicated it expects to be able to achieve about a 20% disadvantaged business participation, and we'll be continuing to work with them on the specific subcontracts. The total value of the contract is not to exceed $8.2 million. And with that, recommend your approval and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Jason Tell, and for this proposal and for being here.
Good. Questions by the board? Comments from our representative from East County?
Well, being that, of course, I mean, we always like to see improvements and enhancements of transportation out to East County, of course. And we're very much looking forward to the Powell Division corridor being improved. So this is exciting that we get to see the beginnings of this after all the planning that's gone into it. So I'm supportive. I think I would echo the rest of the community as we look to get this incredible connection between downtown and East County. So we want to be the engine of business as we go forward. So with that, I think this will, from a Powell Division transit perspective, looking forward to this.
Any other questions or comments by the board? Would you also care to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right. Is there a second to the motion to approve this?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's, all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-47, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, as motion is approved unanimously. And congratulations to our local firm here on getting that done. Let's go on to Resolution 17-05-48, which is authorizing a modification to a contract with Modern Railway Systems, Inc. to implement positive train control for the West Side Express, west as we call it, commuter rail line. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, I thought that by this time in a very long agenda, you'd certainly be tired of hearing from me. So I brought up Steve Witter to give you just a little bit of background on the positive train control implementation, the work we've been doing, and what this modification would really be about. So Steve, if you could, please.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, thank you for having me today. I'd like to introduce just positive train control. We'll talk about what it is, the history of PTC, sort of how it works, and where we are with regard to implementation so far. Positive train control essentially is a system that is integrated, that integrates the dispatch function, the wayside signal function, and the train function. And what it does is continually monitors the operation of the train to make sure it's operating safely. If it senses an unsafe condition, like two trains in the same piece of track or a train running over speed, the computer control system will take control of that train and either stop it or bring it to a safe speed. Essentially, it protects against rail-to-rail collisions, overspeed trains, and trains incurring a work area where we might see railroad workers in a zone. Some history really quick. The Federal Railroad Administration regulates heavy rail, including our West commuter rail service, and they're actually the ones that have called for positive train control. The National Transportation Safety Board has been pushing for positive train control since the 90s. Whoops. Oh, my picture came out. Anyway, so part of the implementation actually resulted from a tragedy that happened in Los Angeles, California. I think we've all probably heard about that, and actually had a lot of influence into how we designed WES control systems in the very beginning. 25 fatalities, 102 injuries. That actually accelerated the implementation of positive train control, and President Bush signed that into legislation in 2008. PTC system, we actually run what's called enhanced automatic train control. It was developed by TriMet. It's actually leveraging an existing system that we already have to keep trains separated, as I mentioned. And many other properties around the United States use that, and they include Utah, Florida, Texas, New Mexico, and California. And so they're all trying to implement this same system at the same time. So we decided to join forces as a user group to actually work with the FRA and design the system that would be used across all of those properties. Very quickly, how it works. Up in the left-hand corner, you've got a dispatcher. They set a route for a train. That electronic route is then sent out to the signaling system across the railroad. The signaling system confirms that the train indeed has a safe route, and then the operator gets an indication, a control panel here, the engineer's display, and it talks about what code they've received. Code is an important word that I'll use again, and what speed they will proceed. That indicator will also let the train operator know that they have a change in code coming up, so moving from 40 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour, and the operator has a certain amount of time to make that change. If they don't make that change in that time, the computer will take over, stop the train, or slow it to a safe speed. Just wanted to status where we're at. We've been at this for quite some time. Again, I said the legislation was enacted in 2008. We began to respond immediately in 2009 with an RFP to secure the service of a consultant team. We got a concept, our enhanced automatic train control concept was approved by the FRA in 2011. We went on to design and implement the system, and we were actually out in the field testing our system in 2015. And so we've gone through design, we've gone through the implementation and the field testing. We're essentially ready to turn it on. However, the FRA, along with our property and all those other properties that I mentioned, said that there is a single point of failure in your system. So I mentioned the word code. The code comes up and it says you have, this many miles an hour you can operate. If the code disappears, so for some reason the train loses its code, the train stops, the operator can press a button, it's called no code proceed, and they can proceed with permission from the dispatch to move their train forward to the next safe spot or the next train block. The FRA is concerned that the operator has the ability to move the train without calling dispatch. And so they call that operator the single point of failure. And so the FRA has recognized that this is unsafe, so they've asked us to fix it. We've done so. As I mentioned, the no code proceed allows the operator to move actually without the approval of the dispatcher. So that was what FRA asked us to fix. Through working with the users group and the other folks facing this dilemma, we actually designed a system where that the operator is no longer able to press that button, no code proceed. They actually have to call dispatch, and dispatch will issue a new code. It may be a no code proceed, operate very slowly. But again, the dispatcher has the control, not the operator in the train. So that was what FRA was really looking for. Of course, this is a very complicated system, sort of bleeding edge technology, so I just wanted to outline the things that are actually part of this change order. Software engineering is a big part of it. We do have modifications to the dispatch center, systems integration, testing, and documentation. It's really critical that we document for our safety certification process and also for our FRA compliance, so that's included in there. We've also included in that 3.5 sort of a $100,000 contingency, and really that's when we get out to test in the field. We're just want to make sure that we don't have to come back to this body for a small change if the field testing results in a little extra delay or a little extra effort. So that represents the body of our change order. I'd also like to note that we've applied for a $2.7 million grant from FRA to help offset the cost of this compliance, and we hope to hear later this year about that grant. I think with that, just to summarize, we're on track for implementation and compliance in 2018. We continue to work with Portland and Western Railroad, our host railroad, as well as the FRA and the other user groups, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have. Thank you.
Good.
What's the or I shouldn't say possibility, but how confident are we that we would be able to fund some of this through the FTA? I know it's going to be difficult to kind of give a response to that, but do we have any inclination if this is something that's a real possibility?
Director Stovall, I think our team felt like the requirements, and I don't have the specifics here, but the requirements and guidelines for that grant and the need for us to complete our PTC implementation was a pretty good match.
Mm-hmm.
And so we feel optimistic, but we've not had any feedback.
Okay. And of course, for us to be able to use heavy rail in this capacity, I mean, the PTC is required, correct?
That's correct.
We have to move forward with positive train control.
We have to move forward, and I just want to say, FRA this is a little bit new territory for them, and so with all kind of leading edge technologies, there can be hiccups along the road, and I would sort of lump this into that category with our relationship with FRA.
All right.
So I had a question. Remind me, does this apply to the freight rail side too, where the P&W has to do similar upgrades?
P&W has to do similar upgrades. We are helping to fund that through this program. They would not have to do this if there was not passenger rail on their system.
Oh, they wouldn't, okay.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. That answers my next question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions? All right then, is the board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-48?
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call for the vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-48, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to Resolution 17-05-49, which is authorizing a contracts with PRR, Inc., Pulsar Incorporated, and Struck Incorporated for advertising agency services. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, we've had some very good service from our current incumbent advertising firm, but the contract had run up to its value, and we thought it was time to begin to move out into the marketplace and solicit additional services. As you see from your staff report, we received a great number of proposals associated with this. Again, I think the team had a very hard time getting through all of that, but we have some very, I think, positive recommendations to you to actually establish contracts with the 3 firms that were noted. So overall, as you'll note, that we had proposals from 12 firms, went through, created a short list, received other proposals and short lists, and we believe that this mix of services will provide us a great deal of service moving forward. And again, we have a number of important topics, including the advancement of the Help FastPass, the outreach efforts associated with that, ongoing communication efforts. So we have a number of different applications that they will be helping us with. I'd also just note that each of the contracts are for 1 year to start with, but the extension is possible for another 4 years. Each contract would be for $600,000 per year, not to exceed $300,000 each for the full 5-year term if all options are exercised. And for larger tasks, those over $10,000 will actually be competing it amongst the firms that are on these task order contracts. Certainly JC or Bernie would be happy to answer any questions you have. I think I've exhausted my knowledge, but do recommend your approval. But we're happy to address any questions you may have.
Yes.
I'm just curious, are any of the firms that we're awarding contracts to our current provider? So,
no.
New team entirely? Okay.
Right.
Other questions? Well, I think this board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-49.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-49, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on then. What I see is the last resolution of the day, which is Resolution 17-05-50, which is authorizing a contract with Voltio, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, LLC, recruiting from an unsolicited proposal for the Internet of Things solution architect and integration consultant. You're going to explain what all that means for everybody, right?
I'll probably volley some questions to Tim McHugh here before very long. But again, first of all, my thanks for your patience sitting through all these resolutions, very long agenda today. But I'm very grateful for your continued attention on this. We do need to think about integrating our light rail vehicles into the broad internet world of big data, of looking at real-time maintenance information, communication between the train and our maintenance facilities, improving the function of our maintenance staff. There's a number of different functions, real-time video data, for example, that are really facilitated by really a portal to the internet for our light rail vehicles. And we believe that this portal will become very important in terms of the communication of the cars and our ability to really maximize their uptime, their value, and our ability to serve them and serve our customers well. This whole Internet of Things world is a little bit new to all of us, and certainly a little bit new related to the light rail application, but we think it's really important and really aligns with some of the objectives we've got related to improved service and improved maintenance and safety. So with that, some time ago, you approved a contract with DKS that began to delve into this topic with us, how to do this in a smart way. We then began to talk to some of the marketplace, some of the vendors. We received, as part of that entree to the marketplace, an unsolicited proposal from Volteo, LLC. And as we began to engage with them, we found that it was a very admirable proposal to really provide the services that are outlined in the resolution. And remember, for an unsolicited proposal, we have 3 steps that we go through. They're outlined in your board memo, but there's an initial review and evaluation related to a series of criteria. We then post a notice so that anybody else who has a better idea can be advised that we'd like to hear from them. And then if there is no additional competition coming forth, then we conduct final review and negotiations with the contractor. And so we've done that with Volteo and recommend a contract in the amount of $300,000 for these system architect and engineering overview services. I would note that the only other party we heard from related to this was with Siemens, who's interested in also beginning to improve their ongoing communication and maintenance services, and so they were interested in really finding out what the scope of services were, but did not submit a competitive proposal to Volteo on this rate. So with that, I'd ask Tim McHugh or others to see if I've misstated anything very dramatically, and offer the opportunity for any questions you may have.
The only thing I would add to that is that their role is the architecture of the entire system, right, and not so much doing any of the implementation, and also that it's so that their role is to architect specifically for the rail car initially, but it's also to keep in mind where it may go from there. As for any other smart city initiatives, anything that we want to do with connected vehicles in the future, that the architecture is open to those things when they come up.
Point. Questions? Yes.
I have a question. So is this new Volteo, are they going to be working with DKS, the group whose contract we approved last year?
Yes, so DKS will continue on with us in overseeing the entirety of the project, but Volteo will deal with some of the technical details of it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have a question, but just a comment, just to say this is the type of stuff that I find exciting. I mean, this is the innovative stuff that allows us, I think, to be on the cutting edge and be able to, similar to what you just said, Tim, access this data and information that gives us a platform and a foundation to leapfrog or jump into the future as such things come available with the internet and everything that we can have with tracking and additional information that will enhance the rider's experience and everything that goes along with it. So I'm excited to see us pioneering in this space.
Yeah, it's a very exciting project.
Other questions? Question I have, so these folks embrace our open architecture kind of framework for what we do?
Yes, that would be the biggest focus of it.
Okay, that's what I thought. I missed that in the presentation, I guess, so good. Other questions? Is there then a motion to approve Resolution 17-05-50?
So moved.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-05-50, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. So, Mr. General Manager and Board, that looks like what I have for the end of the business meeting today. Is there anything else that needs to come before the board this morning?
Nothing from me.
If it's still morning? It's not this afternoon?
Across the boundary there.
Yeah.
So.
Nothing else? Nothing else from the board? All right, then I'm going to adjourn our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.